Welcome to What If I Don't Like It? I'm your host, KT Baldessaro, and this episode we're talking with cinephile, podcast producer, founder, and host of Movie Night Extravaganza, Forrest Miller, about the 1991 action thriller, Point Break. Welcome to episode 21. This one, we have switched it a little bit. It was supposed to be something different. You might have heard on a previous episode, but we are changing things up, and we are doing a fantastic movie, Point Break, with a fantastic guest, Forrest Miller. So I'm really hyped that we are able to switch this in, and just an absolute special thanks to Forrest for coming in and helping me get this done last minute. It is so appreciated, and I am very happy with the episode I have for you all this time. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Forrest doesn't have anything specifically against Point Break. He knows it's a good movie. He hasn't seen it. He has an aversion to action films. So before you get your English up and be like, what is this guy not liking this fantastic movie? It's more of a blind spot. And I want to say I am encountering more and more, not deliberate, outright hatred for a thing that people haven't seen. Although I can find some of that. It's on the outskirts. It's more often just an aversion to a perceived concept of what a movie might be, and a general feeling that, like, I don't know, I kind of get what that's about. Do I really need to watch it? So, just that little caveat before we dive into this with Forrest. Don't get your pitchforks out. Don't come for him. He does like good movies. He just makes a really great point about how oversaturated the action genre is and how hard it can be to want to sift through all that to find something worthwhile. And as someone who really loves horror movies, God, do I know that feeling. Sometimes you'll be on Shudder just plowing through garbage film after garbage film, or even worse, Tubi, where it's really the depths of the depths. And then you'll find something from a director no one knows about with actors who are just starting out, and it's a gem. And that's kind of the type of movie that I have been predominantly in my career up to now. So do keep going out on Tubi. Do keep going into the depths of Shudder. Don't feel discouraged by that. And, maybe find another friend who's out there to give you some suggestions like I'm doing for Forrest today. Top of the show, quick bit of bookkeeping. Obviously, Forrest is from Movie Night Extravaganza. I am now a permanent co-host on Movie Night Extravaganza, so there is cross-PR happening right now. This is coming out on the 1st. Normally, you'll see a Movie Night Extravaganza on a Tuesday, because that Tuesday is another election debate, and so we're all going to be head first in that information ourselves, and we'll be talking about movies the next day, that Wednesday. And boy, am I excited, because we will be talking about Nosferatu, the 1922 silent film version by Murnau. So, I know that there's a Werner Herzog one later on, and there's many adaptations of it, but we're talking about the very, very first one. This is actually my first time talking on air about a silent film. I'm really hyped about it, and both Forrest and I talk about it a little bit in this episode and our love of Weimar cinema, so something to look forward to there. You can get even more of it by joining us live on YouTube this coming Wednesday, or even just seeing the replay because it will be archived for you. We'll have Matt Weiss, who is an editor and filmmaker, and you might know him on the internet as Matt the Film Guy. He's been on Movie Night a couple of times. He did a live show with me when I was with the group in New York, and we did Mean Streets, which is a Scorsese film. It was one of my first ever live podcasts. So very exciting, super fun stuff. Glad to be back on with him. He is incredibly insightful. Lots of stuff to look forward to. And the reason we're doing Nosferatu is because all month long on Movie Night Extravaganza, they will be doing vampire movies because it's Halloween. And you might be like, no, Halloween's the 31st. And like, no, girl. When you live horror the way I do, it's all month, it's all year. But we'll pretend that it's all month as well for the rest of us so they don't look at us weird. In fact, they'll be having extra episodes because Bonnie Burton, Renee Ruin, Lauren Schwinard, awesome people are joining us. And when Renee joins us, it's going to be a Friday episode, so we're packing them in. In fact, you'll see us on Wednesday about Nosferatu. One day off, next day, that Friday, boom! More movie night in your face. We're doing Bram Stoker's Dracula. And that's a tie-in right here, because if you're liking Keanu Reeves in Point Break, he doesn't do the English accent in Dracula, and you might not like him in Dracula, but you'll get him in Dracula. So you can taste the different varieties of when Keanu works and maybe when Keanu doesn't in his early career. Much love for him. He is a fantastic actor. Back to Nosferatu, though, because I will be hosting a live screening of that film in East Hampton, Massachusetts. I don't have the exact time yet, but it should be on the 27th of October. So in my next episode that comes out on the 15th, you'll get the hard details on that. We will also be screening some short films that are vampire-themed and local, maybe a few others that are not local. We're still deciding the full lineup for that. And this is part of the East Hampton Film Festival with Chris Ferry. I love these guys. I love being part of them. We'll do some screenings. We'll watch the movie. We'll have a talk back with people who made the films and are available. It'll just be a spooky, scary, glorious, fun night. So if you want to come somewhere and see a high-definition playing of the 1922 Murnau Nosferatu, keep your eyes and ears peeled for the 15th, and I'll give you that information, and you can come see it in Western Massachusetts, meet some filmmakers, meet me, have a chat, learn what the East Hampton Film Festival is all about. It should be a lovely time. That's it for the beginning of the show. We're going to run right on into it because Forrest has some really insightful, wonderful things to say. I love getting to talk to him, and normally I talk to him with Conan, Christina, and a guest, and I do love that format. It is just a little bit delicious to get to talk to just Forrest and really, focus in on all of the stuff he has to say from his experience as someone who loves film so much and has been doing a weekly show for 4 years. Movie Night Extravaganza is currently on episode 238, okay? We are on episode 21 right now, so put some respect on the name and let's listen to Forrest tell us about why he hasn't yet seen Point Break.
Ex-presidents are surfers.
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 Places, people! Somebody get that fucking PA out of the shot. Welcome to episode 21. We are here joined by Forrest Miller of Movie Night Extravaganza to discuss Point Break, the 1991 one. Thank you so much for joining us last minute. This is a real joy to have you in here. I know that people who have been listening to the show know that I am now a permanent host on Movie Night Extravaganza, so this is almost like 50% of the crew just doing another show.
Damn, the 2015 one has an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's rough. I don't recognize a single actor that's in the remake.
Edgar Ramirez, I recognize. I couldn't tell you exactly what film, but I definitely have seen stuff with him in it. It is amazing how categorically bad the remake is. And it's just like, there are so many things that went into making the 1991 one like a flash in the pan, a perfect moment, the greatest cast, the greatest stunt, the like really gritty filmmaking, a great director. And then they're like, we'll just remake it again because it was just a good story. And you're like, oh no.
I lied, by the way. I do actually. Edgar Ramirez was Gianni Versace in the assassination of Gianni Versace. So I do recognize him.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
He was good enough playing Italian, I think, that I just didn't really put that together in my head.
He disappears into the role, so it's very hard. There are a couple of actors like that. The guy who plays Dr. Manhattan, who is also a main, Billy Crudup. Billy Crudup is a human being whose name I can never remember and I can never recognize because he's so chameleonic in the stuff that he plays that it's almost a joke when I don't know what the actor's name is. I'm like, who is that guy? Why do I recognize him? My husband will go, it's Billy fucking Crudup.
Trying to picture Billy Crudup.
You can't picture Billy Crudup because he does not let you.
All right, yeah, I know who that is. Yeah,
it just slides off your brain, and yet he is a very gifted actor. It's kind of impressive.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we get too far into discussing this absolute classic of an action film, I did want to take a little bit of time to introduce everybody to who you are. You came on pretty much our third episode to do a little half episode and talk about The Wizard of Oz, which is a film I hadn't seen, but we didn't really get to talk too much about you, and I hadn't started doing my Letterboxd top 4, which is where I ask you about your top 4 and we talk about movies you like so that we can get an idea about who you are as a film goer and get a fuller picture as to maybe why you didn't see this film yet.
So my top 4 on Letterboxd, Clerks, that's hands down one of my favorite movies. Like since I think I watched it at the perfect time in my life. Like I watched it when I was 13 with like my best friend, and she and I like watched it, and we still fight. Sometimes I still text her like 37 because I think
yes.
But it was also when we had our 100th Movie Night Extravaganza episode, and it was like, it was right around, I think, 1 year, which is crazy that we did 100 episodes, and I think it was 1 year. It might have been 2 years.
Yeah.
But like when we did episode 100, it was Clerks. That was like our
fantastic
for that reason, because they said, "What do you want to do for your 100th, like for our 100th episode?" And I was thinking about it, and I was like, "Clerks, we gotta do Clerks." Like,
I definitely encountered that when I was about the same age, and it is so perfect for that viewer. It was also the first film that I'd ever seen made on such a shoestring budget that it absolutely inspired me as a filmmaker.
Yeah, same. And I wanted to be, I mean,
Yes.
I went to college for digital media production, and like I've wanted to be a filmmaker. Like pretty much that's what I've always pictured myself doing. And of course, those who can't do podcasts, that's what they
You're just honing what you know about what you like and you don't like, so that when you do go to make a film, you'll have all of this media to draw upon. I also thought about that particular scene that you referenced when Donald Trump got indicted with that many indictments. It's very hard not to be like in a row.
I think somebody made that as a meme when it first.
It was me.
Yeah.
It was me.
Oh yeah. That's perfect. All right. So number 2, sorry to bother you. We've actually done every single one as an episode in my top 4. But sorry to bother you. As like a leftist and as someone who at the time when Sorry to Bother You dropped was working in left media, I was editing for Michael Brooks. That movie was a revelation, not just because it managed to convey a lot of ideas that were kind of circling around in my head and about Silicon Valley and about the tech sector and techno-feudalism and all of that, but also did it in a way that wasn't preachy and did it in a way that was interesting. And Boots Riley is such an interesting director. So and it was like, his first film. It was kind of mind-blowing.
All of the films that we are talking about now, if you want to hear Forrest talk more about them, there are movie night episodes. And in the liner notes, I will put links to each episode for these films.
I definitely recommend the Sorry to Bother You one. It's episode 3. It's the first time Conan came on.
Oh, that is classic. What a moment in time.
But we talked about that, and we talked about now I can't remember the name of. There was another movie about Oakland. Like it was a similar like a similar kind of movie that we talked about, and we kind of did it as like a version of it was Blind Spotting, I think. Yeah, it was Blind Spotting.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
We talked about like both those movies, and we did like kind of an episode on Oakland, and I had Jason Miles and I had Conan because they're both from Oakland. So we had a conversation about that.
And then he just couldn't leave, much like how you guys got me. I came on with Jared, and we went physically into Andy's basement. And I remember telling, because Jared knows him and they were friends physically and they knew each other ahead of time. And I remember telling him, like, I will show up and I will sit in my car and I will not. As a person who started a film called Girl in the Basement, I am not going in this basement alone, motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think of that when you went on. And we were talking about was that the one where we talked about Delicatessen, or was that the one where we talked about Peter Jackson's Dead Alive?
Jackson. Yeah. Dead Alive was my first one, yeah. And then I just couldn't. I kept coming on. It's just too much fun to chat with you guys.
And then Jared moved and kind of fell off, and like he came on for Furiosa recently, but like we haven't really had him on as much. And
That's because Jared is out in LA right now. He's actually having a table read of his most recent script, Woodfellas, which is a comedy horror. Uh, he is such a gifted writer. It's such a fantastic script. I've been allowed to read it ahead of time. I cannot wait for this to get its legs and for people to get to see and hear it. It's wonderful.
I'm looking forward to seeing that, or reading the script.
Well,
Or whatever
I
yeah.
I know a guy who can get you a copy of the script. So what's your third movie?
All right, so the third one's Parasite.
Fucking love that one. The problem
Yeah.
is when people tell me their top 4, I start to be like, I want that in my top 4. I gotta edit mine.
Oh, so the first 3 were added to my top 4 when I first got Letterboxd. Those were like the first 3 ones I added because at the time, there's a lot of movies I could probably put in the top 4. I'm not very good at I'm never good at siphoning down to like a few movies, right? Like
Same.
I'm always like, oh, this movie, oh, I could put that movie in there and this movie in there. So I have those 3, and then I have one that I added more recently. Well, so talking about Parasite though,
Okay, yeah.
kind of think like similar reasons to Sorry to Bother You. My politics and like where I was kind of in the headspace when that movie came out and the class consciousness element of it. And like, I mean, it could be that one or it could be Snowpiercer, both Bong Joon-ho movies. Like those could be interchangeable, I think, because I love both those movies for similar reasons.
Parasite gets a little bit more clout. The cinematography is a little bit more. I mean, it's a later film, so it should be more advanced. Every director should get better with each go.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first heavy horror, not like thriller drama films to win Academy Awards. So people feel great to be like, yeah, this is what I'm going to put my hat on.
More recently, I watched Memories of a Murder. Like, I think last year. That movie's so fucking good from Bong Joon-ho too. The only one I haven't watched that I really want to is Okja. Never gotten around to watching it.
I think that if you like all the rest, you'll still like that one.
I know it. Like I 100% know I will. It just was one of those things that like we talked about covering it and stuff, and I kind of assumed I was gonna wait until we did.
Yeah, I do have to admit I enjoy Movie Night Extravaganza because it gets me to watch movies that I was like, oh, I meant to watch The Nice Guys. It just, I have this list of films I have to watch, so it keeps falling to the bottom. But if you make it a have to watch film this week, I'll check it off.
Yeah. Honestly, like Nosferatu, like we're covering that one next. And that's another one of those movies that it's like, because it's silent, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things I have to be pushed into like watching it.
Oh, but like once you start to sit there and really look at it and break it down, because it is silent. So we're really talking about just the cinematography, just what I can convey with the camera. And the acting is so rudimentary as well, because it's so beginning of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like it really is, it is kind of gritty, but there's also an aspect of like, oh shit, this is how they used to do it. This is how can I build these fundamentals into a film that comes out hundreds of years later? Like that's my bread and butter. Plus, also, it's just a creepy ass film, and I fucking love creepy ass
I'm a
films.
huge fan of German expressionism in general. Like, number one, just like and you can see how like Freud came out of like Austria or like Carl Jung, like that. Like you can see why psychology was such a big part of like what Germany, Austria, like that whole region of the world exported to the rest of the world, because it's like one of those things where like even their early filmmaking is so littered with surrealism and dreams, and like everything has to like it's all interchangeable, and the sets are so amazing. Like M is another movie that's classic.
I adore that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my god, do I adore. I took a Weimar cinema class in college where it was just literally like, I don't think I know these movies, and then it was like banger after banger after banger after Katie, get your shit together. I'm like, I can't. We can't watch another great film. And then I was also taking a British cinema class at the same time, so it'd be like M, and then like Strangers on a Train, and it was too much good shit all at once.
I saw M when they first came out with Filmstruck, like, and they were like, oh, classic movies, like before they really, I mean, before Criterion did their like channel, right? Like before Criterion had that going, and it was just kind of DVD sales. So I remember Filmstruck opened up as such a resource, but I didn't have money at the time because I had just finished college, And I remember going, I'm gonna watch as many movies, and I did this. I stuck to my guns, but I was at my dad's house, and like I just like turned on Filmstruck, and I was like, we got to do this. We gotta. I was like, we gotta watch as many of these as we can. And we had a trial for 2 weeks, and I think I watched like 25 movies, and it's like it was a crazy amount of movies.
That is insane. I love that, though. That's the way to do it. That's like when I was a kid, you would get HBO free for the weekend. They'd just unlock the channel, try and like, first hit is free. And my dad would buy like a 6-pack of VHS blanks and just tape the entire weekend. Don't care what it is. We're going to filter through and see what movies we can watch for the next month for free.
When I was a kid, my dad was really anti-TV. Like he didn't like we didn't have cable. We got cable.
Wow.
I remember we accidentally got cable at one point. Don't fucking ask me how, but
fell off a truck.
Well, he just wanted to like watch PBS, and then somehow we ended up getting a bunch of channels, and he got so disgusted by me and my brother watching TV all day during like a snow day or something when we should have been playing outside, that he called the cable company and reported that they accidentally gave him TV and made us have no more TV.
Son of a bitch.
But he was like, all right, we can try to explore this or whatever. And then like the second he saw us like lounging, he was like, couch potatoes, like called up the cable company and reported it.
Oh my God. You grew up in New Paltz?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm just trying to. I grew up in the city, so there was only so much outside, and my parents were definitely like, "Why don't you go hang out with the TV some, please?"
Yeah, we moved from Brooklyn to New Paltz when I was 5, and a lot of it had to do with like the air in the city just not being, just being pure fucking industrial waste and human beings or whatever. And
Oh yeah.
we moved 1 year before 9/11 happened, which we 100% would have moved, after 9/11 happened if we stayed in 1 year. So it was inevitable, I think. Yeah.
Wow. What a great time to have left. I remember as a kid when I was like 8, I did a science project where I took Vaseline and petri dishes. So I grew up literally like outside my window was Union Turnpike. And I went outside, I just stuck the Vaseline gel in the air above the overpass of the turnpike. And like, the particulate in like a matter of minutes that would wind up in the gel. So fun stuff, good urban living, classic urban living.
I remember going back down to work in the city for like a day. I think it was like 2019, and I remember like just staring down into the Gowanus Canal. My dad was like, "Yeah, like we were, because I was working for like Michael Brooks, so they were like, Majority Report records right there." So my dad drove me down because he was going to see like his girlfriend that he was dating at the time or whatever, and so he just, like dropped me off at the place. But he's like, "Let's go see the old neighborhood," and then we walked past the Gowanus Canal, and I just remember being like, "That is the most disgusting canal," and he's like, "You were raised right by this."
People find out that I learned to swim when I was 21, and they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Because where I grew up, if you wound up in a body of water, there was so many other things that were going on or wrong in your life besides needing to get out of the body of water. Like you probably have tetanus and like 6 diseases now. Like maybe just drown."
I'll admit though, and this might be disgusting, but I've swam at Rockaway Beach.
I swam at what is it, Jones Beach, which isn't that much better because I've definitely seen needles in the sand there.
I went with like a friend to like Rockaway, and we like ran around, and like this was like only like a few, like I think this was like maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I was like, I'll swim around here, and then I swam for a second. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do this anymore.
Good. Have you seen the trailer for Mickey 15?
No, not yet.
Oh, it looks 17? Good. Is it 17?
Yeah, I guess it's 17.
I'm so like
right now.
I will say, have you seen 50 Rock? 20 Rock? I am the worst at getting near a number in a television show or movie and being like, I don't know.
I have I swear I have dyslexia, but only for numbers.
Yeah. Oh, I spoon
if
numbers.
I have to read a number, I have to like really think about it, and like, and like when I'm doing the intros for movie night, it comes out all the time. I have to like do it really slowly, be like, okay, so this number is, and like I have to think about it before I say it. I don't even know why. Like it doesn't even make any sense.
I will do the same thing. I will spoon numbers if I'm not focusing. And people make fun of me because if I'm trying to give you a long list of numbers, the only way that I can pay attention the whole time is to tell them in units. So I'll be like 0, 10, 27, 5, 15. And people are like, why don't you just say 0, 1, 0, 2, 7? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Deal with it.
I see them in units. I always try to connect, but I feel like that makes you remember them more.
Mm-hmm. We are of the same mind. But Mickey 15, it looks a lot more comedic than you normally get from that director, and I have my interest piqued.
I mean, Parasite's pretty comedic. I think he does
It,
comedy pretty well.
I
Oh,
think,
I did see the Mickey 17 trailer at one point with
yeah,
Robert Pattinson.
with Fab Pads.
Yeah,
It's
or at least
got like,
I don't know if I saw the like I've definitely seen like production stills at least when they were
yeah,
putting.
it's been pushed back drastically. Like it just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. It's supposed to have come out, I think, this summer, and now it's pushed back into next year. He does a lot of satire, and this is a really interesting thing because I just saw The Substance, and people are calling The Substance a horror comedy, and I really feel like the place between when something should be called a comedy and when something should be called a satire is important because like it's funny, but it's not hilarious. And so when sometimes you say like, "Oh, Parasite's a comedy," people are like, "I didn't laugh that much," and you're like, "No, it's a
Yeah,
satire.
but
It's
I feel like you do laugh a
funny."
lot in Parasite.
I
Like
do.
the kid in Parasite's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, that is true.
I love when he's like, "Wow, it's so metaphorical," and he says that over and over again.
I know, I know.
So the last one on my top four,
Mhm.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, wow, classic.
Yeah,
Hot take, I can't make it through that film. I've never seen it all in one go. I have to like go and then come back.
yeah. I mean, I could see why that's the case. Although I think it's one of the most like breathtaking and
Oh yeah.
amazing spectacles of any film that's ever really. I had that for a while, and this is a crazy movie to have this with, but another Kubrick movie, Clockwork Orange. It took me a few times to
I
watch
would
it all
agree
the
with
way through.
that.
I had to watch it
Yeah.
in bits and pieces. Now I watch
Mhm.
it. Now I've watched it probably like a dozen times, and I'm like, how is this the movie? But I remember like the whole scenes, like there was just so many scenes of ultra violence by that point that I was like, it's hard to like. I'd always try to like watch it after like smoking a joint or something too, and it was like I think it was like too much of a too like sensory overload.
Yes.
I was
Yeah, I
finally
did.
watching it sober. I was like, okay, I can do this. But it feels like such a like like smoke a joint and watch Clockwork Orange kind of movie, and it's like, no, I guess not. Like,
I think that it might be just a case of like uh, video game shortcuts. Like in a video game, if when it's starting, you press up, up, left, left, A, B, C, D, and it like instigates a trigger code, and now you can't die when you play the game.
yeah,
It's like certain films have cut sequences and colors and lights in a certain order where like I just can't I don't know what happens, like, I fugue out. Like, there's 2 movies I literally cannot watch. I will start watching, and then I will black out and come to several hours later and just be like, "What happened?" And they don't make any sense. It's the first Christopher Nolan Batman, and it's Patch Adams. Like, I don't know what happens. I start watching Patch Adams, and then it's over. And I never make it to the part where his wife dies. I have no idea what happens in that movie. I don't know what's happening.
I mean,
But
with 2001, I think just this year I showed it to my mom, like because I was just watching it downstairs, and she came downstairs and was like, "Oh, what are you watching?" And I was like, "2001: Space Odyssey." And she's like, "Oh, I've
Mhm,
never seen that, but like you've talked about it a lot." And I do feel like it's very slow at some points, right? Like it's very
mhm,
slow and it's very methodical, and that can be
mhm,
hard, I think, to watch all in one
mhm.
take because it's like it's in parts, and like there's a part of you I think that wants to get up and like go to the bathroom or like get something to eat or something between the parts, and then so much happens in like a short period of time that you like I don't know. So I can see that being a movie that is hard to watch all in one because it's like what 2.5 hours long, like it's long.
Yeah, it does take It's a movie that asks you to actually fucking watch it all
Yeah.
the time, to actively watch it, even though a lot of actiony stuff is not happening, action is happening, which is kind of funny because 'cause we're here to discuss the whole concept of action films, and this film is an action film that seems to skew against what is considered, like, gripping the audience, but it is still gripping the audience. You just have to, like, really you can't smoke a joint and watch that movie, is right. You really do
Yeah.
need to be paying attention, and although the cinematography is gorgeous.
It's so amazing, and it's like the first real use of taking NASA and like having NASA assist with like a movie to that degree. That's like, hey, what can you actually do in space, and like actually following the science. I mean, there's like Tarkovsky stuff with the
Mm,
cosmonauts and stuff like Solaris.
mhm.
I think where he kind of did a similar like thing, but at least
Mhm.
in America, like it's the most like, and now that's just what they do whenever there's a movie about space. But up
Yeah.
until that point, I mean, besides like there were a couple movies that like inspired 2001, but like they were like NASA produced. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like NASA kind of trying to show or like World's Fair produced. Like they were movies that were either government or like scientific agencies trying to show what's possible
Mhm.
in space. And this was like the first version of like a, not to say that it was like, the first version of a science fiction movie, because it absolutely was not, but like
Yeah.
it was the first kind of science fiction movie that really did that.
Yeah, the first time that we say we get a technical expert on where we wanna make sure that we're kind of adhering to what would be experienced in, say, more of a documentary or even propaganda for NASA film. That
And
is
they
so
didn't think that
cool.
they could really do that. Like they were like, this seems like too big of an undertaking. But I mean, if anyone could do it, it would be Kubrick. And he's the same guy
Yeah.
that by memory and by blueprint recreated the fucking B-52 bomber in Doctor Strangelove. And to a degree that was so on point that he literally had the United States government come knocking on his door demanding to know where he got the inside of a B-52 bomber.
Oh, Snapple sauce. You put me in one, guys.
Yeah.
That's why you gotta get him to sign that NDA. That is
Well, he had
crazy.
writers that were, like, writing with him and, like, like, that had fought in World War II.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, it was so, like, literally perfect to the detail that, like, the military was like, "Okay, like, let's talk about how you actually knew what the inside of one of these planes looks like."
It's great. Oh, what's the one with Sandra Bullock? Moon? No, Gravity.
Yeah.
That one had a lot of, like, technical aspects. They had Neil deGrasse Tyson being like, "Well, yes, and of course." So, like, if you're gonna get your film fact checked by actual famous physicists and
Yeah, but
yeah,
Neil
now
deGrasse
you're
Tyson
gonna
was
do that.
annoying mostly. I mean, he goes online and just comments on every science fiction film. Goes, "Well, actually, you can't, do this way. You have to." It's like, bro, shut the fuck up and watch the movie. Like,
Did you see the Adam Sandler Spaceman? Because it feels like a really nice space in between those 2 styles of film. It's an American film, but it is set in, Czechoslovakia, so it's got this, like,
I didn't see that.
kind of feeling. Oh, I think you'd enjoy it. It's got Paul Dano playing a character where he only voices, and it's kind of like, "Oh, I did not expect any of this."
Wait, that's not the Linklater one, right? Where he
No, it's the Adam Sandler does it's part of the Sadlerverse where Adam Sandler does a dramatic sad role.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on
Right.
Netflix. People either loved or hated it, and I kinda liked it. Some people really hated it. We did an episode on it.
Um, I mean, even though looking at like something like Interstellar, right? Like it's Christopher Nolan doing his version of
Mhm.
2001: A Space Odyssey, but like even
Mhm.
that's pretty good. I mean,
Breathtaking. That is a
yeah.
real breathtaking movie. I really love the way that they handled time in that film because the subject that we're talking about is very hard to write. Like, we're talking about things that aren't even really real, but you kind of wanna make them feel real in an actiony sort of way. So, you're being held to a certain amount of physics, but then also you're making some of it up. Like, as long as you're logically consistent about the way that your sci-fi works, it can feel real. But that's harder said than done versus like this movie, Point Break. We have an action film set on Earth. We don't have to worry about being sent all over the place. Do you prefer your action in space?
I mean, I don't know. I prefer my action to be actiony enough to keep me riveted. I don't necessarily have like a preference either way. I like movies about space though.
I do prefer my action in space. I will admit, if you can literally say to me, Katie, so it's a space movie, and I'm like, we're good, just go. We'll watch it. We're fine. And they'll be like, no. I'm like, shut up, just tell me. And then if you say if it's a space horror, I'm like, just put it in front of my face. And space horror is, I guess, a diversion of action as well. But when you think of action, why do you say you don't entirely like it?
I don't dislike it. There's just so many action movies that I feel like at some point I've kind of tuned out. And like if someone's like, "Hey, this is an action movie. It's really great." I'll watch it and I'll probably enjoy it. It's just not like when you were talking about what genre have you seen the least movies from, or what genre have you like I don't know feel like you've seen the least. I feel like it's action because there's a lot of bad action movies and I just don't gravitate towards them. I'm not in space. So.
I think action and horror are a very oversaturated market. It's definitely a place where people like to start. And I'm going to make a big, bold statement, and it might be a little hyperbolic now. I think that you can get away without having very good plot if you try and up your horror or up your action. And that is why we get so many bad in this genre. Like, you don't have to have decent characters because shit blew up and it was fun.
It's also like when you type in like if you're looking at best action movies or newest action, like it goes through, it spans a lot of genres, and a lot of them are genres that I have seen a lot of movies in, but that I don't think of as action necessarily. Like I mean, sci-fi is a good example of like a lot of sci-fi action movies, or like even looking through like the list of what they've considered like action movies. Like I don't think of a lot of them as action movies. They have like Civil War. Like I don't necessarily think of that as I just saw that recently, and like that's not like action movie wouldn't be the first thing that came into mind. Or like they have Dusk Till Dawn on like the list of like top ones that like I wouldn't think automatically. Like I think of vampire movie or like like when I think of that, like so there's a lot of movies that are probably action movies, but that I don't necessarily think of as action movies. I mean, if I have to give like a favorite subgenre, I've seen like I like heist movies a lot. I like crime movies a lot, like stuff like that.
So whenever you put a movie into Google, it will give you what it thinks it is. Action thriller is what it's calling Point Break. And I will admit, I have never seen a movie labeled just action. It is always something else. It's action slash. So you're right that, like, is this even an entire genre on its own, or does it always need to be accompanied by a qualifying genre point, you know?
Yeah. There's a whole section of action movies starring Tom Cruise.
I know. Just tell me Tom Cruise movies. Although to go right back to what you just said, I don't want to leave the fact that you like crime heist movies, because guess what? That's what we fucking have here. This is a crime heist movie. This is like, fuck yeah. I mean, you've seen Heat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's like my favorite action movie of all time. How do you feel about Heat?
I mean, it's great. I have to rewatch it. Like I watched it when I was like, I don't know, I watched it when I was still in college, I think. So it's been like a little bit, but like I've seen a bunch of the scenes a million times. Like I think when they had it on Netflix is when I watched it. I don't know if it still is because I haven't really been on Netflix as much. I feel like it's been surpassed by all the other streaming services. But yeah, I like Heat a lot. I mean, it has all the elements that I like. Fucking, like a mob like infrastructure, and like it has like most of my favorite actors in it. At least like mafia style actors. Like
yeah, and I really love how it still has very good character development. You really start to appreciate who these two main characters are and the emotional experience of this bank robber. It's not just a will they get away with it. It's about why they do what they do and how we interact in the world that they create for themselves.
with Heat, like I feel like it's rare that they've had Pacino and De Niro like sit across from each other. Like I feel like they're in a lot of the same movies and then they don't like, I mean, just thinking about like Godfather 2, like they're on completely different timelines. Like
yes. Yeah, and that's definitely the allure in seeing Heat, is to get to see two really big actors adjacent to each other in a movie, although limitedly adjacent to each other. In this movie, we get two very big actors adjacent to each other in hindsight. Patrick Swayze, definitely a big actor when this movie comes out in 1991, but Keanu Reeves, this is his first action film. Until this, he has been doing more of the art house stuff, and to the point where people were like, this is going to tank his career. Oh my God. I don't know if this is going to be worth it. But we get to watch it now and go like, oh my God, Swayze adjacent, Keanu Reeves. How delicious. And Keanu Reeves, not an action star, because that's not the Keanu Reeves we know now.
Yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Because I mean, I just watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, like, and I was watching it up until literally the point where we just, started recording. So having Keanu Reeves 1 year before, Bram Stoker's Dracula in this was gonna be interesting. It's gonna be like my my Keanu Reeves weekend.
So, because the aspects, if people don't know the plot line to Point Break, it's set in Los Angeles. It's a bunch of bank robbers. The FBI is trying to catch and infiltrate them. They realize that the bank robbers might also be surfers. And so they have this FBI agent, played by Keanu Reeves, infiltrate and pretend to also be a surfer. So he like earns their trust, and they're going to go and do another heist. It was thought up of a guy by one of the two writers, Richard King, was like sitting one day and he heard about a bank robbery in Los Angeles, and he was like, "Oh man, what would be the most Los Angeles way to be a bank robber?" And he comes up with these two what if they were surfers? So when you think of Keanu Reeves, it actually plays into the cadence of his speech. So I will admit that when you watch him in Bram Stoker's, it feels a little bit like, oh dear Lord, what did they do in picking this guy?
Yeah.
But in Point Break, it's totally fine.
I love like the man. I'm walking down the streets of London, man, and he's like, and then he's like, oh fuck, I'm supposed to be doing a British accent. He's like London.
Yeah,
It's like
I
a Fred
mean,
Armisen bit or something when he does, like when Fred Armisen does like the Californians or whatever.
yes, exactly. Good. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. So, I give that a little bit of leeway. Patrick Swayze in this also goes so hard. He is an actual skydiver and loves skydiving. The film features skydiving. He did over 55 jumps for the film. Are you familiar with John C. McKinley? He played
Yeah,
Dr. Cox on, yeah,
yeah,
he
yeah,
is in
yeah.
this. Very young. You get to see him nice and young. He's not totally bald yet. He and Gary Busey talk about, Gary Busey is also in this, by the way. Gary Busey talks about Patrick Swayze pushing him to go and do base jumping, and describes him as an insane man. Gary Busey describes another human being as an insane man.
John C. McGinley is an interesting case because before he was like before it was Dr. Cox, like he was one of the guys that Oliver Stone kept turning towards for Platoon and like the movies like that.
I really like him. I think he's an underrated actor, and I want to see him in more stuff.
Yeah.
Swayze also does almost all of the stunts himself because he refuses to have a stunt guy. He's like, I'm not a guy who has a stunt guy. There is, however, one scene that they used a stunt guy for, and it's because he was out. He was like not available to film that day, and he got really pissed about it. But it is a scene I want you to take a look out for. It's the first scene where they are robbing and they're in the Reagan masks. It's a foot sequence. Scott Wilder was able to do it because they put masks on the guys. But the reason I'm telling you to look out for this when you watch it later is that scene is considered one of the best shot foot chases in all of action film up to date. And I won't tell you too much more about it because I don't want to ruin it. But like, it is bittersweet for Swayze to be like, I do all my own stunts, except for that one stunt, which is now
Yeah.
the most famous scene in the film. Ooh.
So this is 1 year after Ghost, and then 2 years after Roadhouse. So this is I'm definitely curious about this.
Yeah, that's why he wasn't able to shoot it. He was actually in Europe doing press for Ghost, and they couldn't. They're like, we got to shoot the film, my friend.
One of the most iconic pottery scenes in film.
Dude, right? Actually, Demi Moore was recently doing an interview with Seth Meyers for Substance, and she's talking about how she still has the pots that they made on set. They let her fire and keep them. And she's thinking about like auctioning them for eBay for charity. Like, can you imagine owning? And she's like, they're not good. I'm not a potter. They were just what I made while
Yeah.
we were shooting. This like little lopsided vase, and you're like, it's the one from. I would love that though. Sign me up. So, what is an action movie that you like? If you could say this is the worst action movie I've ever seen, and then maybe like why?
I don't off the top of my head. It's hard to think of what I think is the worst action movie of all time. It's like just a lot of bad ones.
Yeah. How do you feel about those types of action films? Like, there was one that recently came out with Skarsgård. It was called Kill, and it's just almost no dialogue. They have God, the guy who plays Bob's Burgers, that voice. H. John Benjamin voices his like narration over as he's just like it's almost or even Monkey Man, where it's really, really, really action driven and narration second.
I mean, yeah, I wanted to see Monkey Man, and then I completely forgot to like to go see it. It looked really good, but I
Streaming
mean,
now on Peacock.
all right, so I'm gonna have to watch it. I don't like, I don't my. I'm looking at 100 worst action films, and they have like RoboCop on there. I guess that must be the remake, right? Like,
They must be talking about the remake, otherwise that list needs to be burned. I think for me, I kind of go straight towards Transformers.
yeah, I haven't, I
Yeah.
haven't, I haven't watched this since I was like a kid. The Michael Bay one.
Yeah, but then also there's a point where it kind of and I know that there are some people who do not enjoy this. There's a point where it almost like goes over the like bad point and comes back around for me, and I do enjoy watching epically bad films because I find that funny. And so like I want to say some of the Fast and the Furiouses are terrible, and they are, but also I do enjoy
Yeah, all right,
watching
yeah.
them.
I think that is what I said when you asked me for like the worst I could think of was I saw Too Fast, Too Furious. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like that kind of movie at all. I mean, I also don't really drive, so I don't get anything out of watching other people do it. But like I guess the entire point of whatever, like looking at the 100 worst action movies of all time, quote unquote, like I don't think I've seen any of the ones that are on this list. And that's kind of why I picked this as a genre, because it's like there's just so many action movies that I haven't seen. They mass market them, right? Like it's the genre, I think, that more than anything else they kind of pump out.
Oh god, yeah. And when you get one like this, it's often hard to have it stand out enough. Although, I mean, this is we haven't even really talked about how this is directed by Catherine Bigelow, a
Yeah.
female director, and this is her highest grossing film until Zero Dark 30 comes out. Cost 25 million to make, not super expensive for the time period, makes 85 in box office. So it's not like this film came out and people didn't see it, but it is hard to like keep it aware of its existence because, like you said, they're making so many. The list gets so big and so fast. They've even already remade this very badly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the ass, but it's almost special because it's a female director. What she does with some of the cinematography and like when they're jumping out of the planes, they have this rig suit on to tape it that is like jerry rigged. A lot of the camera stuff they made on set themselves. They were not made or taped with cameras that existed. They're like putting cameras on sticks to get shit. Like it's
Yeah,
kind of
I like
impressive.
any movie that they kind of do that with. I like looking at the pictures of it.
Yeah, yeah, and so as a filmmaker, I think you will appreciate that aspect of it. It is unlike other action films in that it is kind of hard to not really watch it. It's got a lot going on. It is also very funny. You know, like a lot of action movies, they're funny in spite of themselves. Like this allows itself to be very funny. And in your top 4, you had a lot of films that were political and like counter counterculture. This film is in that way as well. It makes a commentary on culture that is subversive. If you were the kind of person that spent like every day sitting in a car driving to work just doing your dime, you would watch this film and you would kind of relate to not the characters you would expect to relate to.
Yeah, I'm interested to watch it. It's just like I know about Point Break, people have referenced it. It's one of those movies I just haven't seen.
No. And now you're going to be able to do stuff like get the memes too. This is like when we watched Lord of the Rings with my friend. He's like, "Oh my God, there's a whole, now I understand that man eating tomatoes." I saw a great couples costume idea. Lady goes as a tomato, man goes as Denethor. Love it.
Dripping off his mouth.
It's fantastic.
You get both memes about tomatoes and potatoes.
It's good stuff. It's endlessly giving. So as we approach the end of the front part of this episode, I do ask the following two questions, which is there something that you might be looking forward to seeing or something that you're like, God, I hope they don't do?
I mean, I need them to stop doing as many remakes as but
like I hope that they, do a cool explosion, and for the love of God, I hope that they don't like throw a baby around. For me, I do hope they throw a baby around. I enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, in any movie, I hope there's no scene where a dog dies.
Yes, I do have a note on that to tell you. There is not a scene in which a dog dies, but there is a scene in which Bodhi throws a pit bull at Utah. Utah is Keanu Reeves. Bodhi is is Patrick Swayze, who then pulls the dog off of him and kicks it out of view. I did want to let you know the scene was shot in cuts using a fake dog and a real one. The real pit bull is gently tossed by the trainer into the actor's arms at a distance of approximately 1.5 feet. The dog is then prepped for this and then like pretty comfortable. And then they have a pad underneath him so that the dog is like gently put down on the pad. And then Keanu Reeves kicks the fake dog. So,
yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate the note. I mean, it's more like, just if somebody does it in like cold blood, like murders a dog, that's kind of the thing that I'm like, it'll stop me from watching the movie. Plus like like something kind of funny like that.
Yeah, no, I just put that out there because I searched these things because I have so much trouble staying in the story if like they fridge the dog to give the character some sort of motivation. I watched a movie recently where they introduced the character had a dog in the scene that they kill the dog. And I'm like, fuck.
Isn't that what they do to fucking John Wick?
I haven't watched the first John Wick because I can't.
Yeah. So I mean, Keanu Reeves and dogs don't really not the best combination.
Not the best. But other than that, that's the only animal scene.
Something I'm looking forward to. So I enjoy heists. I enjoy seeing how they plotted out kind of heists and like that kind of I like that in movies. Especially I mean, such a high bar, but like The Killing, like movies like that where it's like the whole movie is kind of planning out a heist, which I know that this probably, I mean, this movie seems like it's more about the fallout from the heist kind of happening, but like I like the more elaborately designed a heist is, the more I enjoy it.
Yeah, you're gonna get that. Like this kind of straddles a post heist and a new heist. Yeah, I am so happy to get to rewatch this movie. I haven't seen it in a while. So this is like one of those, oh yeah, this is a good reason to rewatch this movie. And when I tell people that I am about to rewatch this movie this week, I haven't found a single person who has been like, meh. Everyone has been like, oh shit, I think I'm gonna rewatch it too. So I think you are in for a wonderful ride. And I don't think I'm taking too much of a risk here. There are some movies where I'm just like, hey, if you need to text me while you're watching it to, talk you through it or MST3K it with you, feel free. But I feel like this is going to go down pretty easy for you. I forgot what the runtime is as well. It's 2 hours. Wow, it feels like 1 hour and 30. It is a 2-hour movie, but it's not going to feel like The Batman, where we were talking about this before I hit record. I recently watched The Batman, and I swear to God, no matter when I hit pause, I still had 2 hours left. There was a point where I said, like, "Look, if we can make it to the end of this, you don't ever have to watch another Batman movie. Just do it. Come on, please." And I like Batman. I'm being hyperbolic, but it was dreadful.
Yeah, it's long.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, I don't have the bandwidth to sit through it.
No, I just want the Penguin where we're basically seeing Colin Farrell be Tony Soprano. I just want that. It's delicious. It's wonderful. Thank you. Excited to have you get to watch it. We'll talk to you once you get to see it, and, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
They are ghosts.
Yeah, of course. What am I thinking? If you couldn't crack it with all your years of experience, it's impossible to conceive that I might have something to offer, right? Well, maybe I can do better than some over-the-hill burnout.
Hey, watch your mouth.
Maybe you ought to just take some early retirement right now and get some rent-a-cop night security job. Tell Nom stories.
Listen, you snot-nosed little shit. I was taking shrapnel in Quezon while you were crapping in your hands and rubbing it on your face.
I was trying. Hey, we're recording now.
No, you were talking about how pretentious art can be in
Mhm.
some forms, and how women can be pretentious too. And my segue, not recorded, but my segue was going to be let's talk about some art by a woman that's not pretentious.
Boom. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And it's interesting because you can be pretentious about this movie. I read an article, I won't mention the title, but I'll link to it in the liner notes, that has to be the most pretentiously written article I have ever read in my entire life. Every sentence runs on, every other word is like a SAT vocabulary. And like I love this movie, but you can be bloviating about it. You can be a douche about it.
Wait, it was a pro Point Break article that
Mhm.
yeah. All
That was
right.
just a little too like, "Let me smell my own farts." The intricacies of like, it is a good movie, but you have to dial it back a little. The, syntax of how you're describing it is off-putting.
I mean, some of it is, I feel like, like, and I don't mean this in like a disrespectful way to the movie at all, but
Mhm.
it's like kind of a movie like this, right? Like an action movie, like a big dumb spectacle in a way, right? Like,
Mhm.
not saying that it really is when you delve into it, but people can feel like, oh, I can't just enjoy a big dumb spectacle and just be like, yeah, they're surfing, they're robbing the banks, like this
Mhm.
movie is crazy, without being like, well, there's some kind of artistically redeeming quality that that my artistic friends would recognize, but a normal person going to the movies would just be like, hey, this is a fun movie. But you can't say that. You can't just be like, I had fun at the movies. This was a good one, because you're a film critic. What separates you at that point from, the slobs that are going to see the latest action movie and enjoying it?
Yeah, absolutely. Although like, I will put the little, like, asterisk on this that unlike a film like Bad Boys, where I feel you really should be a teenager watching Bad Boys to fully enjoy it at its height, you can be a 35, 40-year-old cinephile and fully enjoy, Point Break.
I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as a teenager, to be honest, as much.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Say more words.
I mean, so as an adult watching this, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
the tones between Keanu Reeves as Johnny Utah and Patrick Swayze, like his Bodie character, which I knew a guy with a dog named Bodie, and now I feel like that has to be a reference to Point Break.
It
But
has to be. Has to be.
but yeah, so I feel like the real story is basically like a homoerotic love story between the two of them, more than it is like the woman, girl Tyler, is just kind of there, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's into her and he's like, oh, I gotta get her back, but like the real fixation and the focus and the obsession is on Patrick Swayze's, way cooler than anybody at the fucking police station bank robber, like,
Yeah, and he's willing to die for him a couple times too, like
yeah.
and vice versa. Bodhi is willing to die for Utah too, or stop him from being killed.
They avoid killing each other on multiple, like they get to the point like, I just can't do it. And it's like, damn, dude, like there's like three different times in this movie where one of them is about to kill the other one, and then either it's the famous Keanu Reeves meme, which you're talking about, the memes from this, where he fires a gun into the air a bunch of times, he goes, ah! But like that one I've seen everywhere every time someone mentions Keanu Reeves, but um yeah, it's like in those moments it feels more like a love story between these
Yeah.
two guys, like a FBI agent and a surfer bank robber, than it is anything else. I mean, they almost complete each other in a weird way.
They're like two sides of the same coin. And in an interesting level, the female character that we do get, which has the kind of it's there, it serves its purpose. It does feel a little strange to have that love story, but it really does serve the story. It can't move if you cut it out too much. She's deeply androgynous. The way that she's portrayed, the way that she's shown.
Yeah, well, her name's even Tyler.
Exactly. So even in the heteronormative love story that we get, there is a homoerotic aspect.
And they're never like, oh, Lisa Tyler or like, and like they never like at her name's just Tyler the entire time.
Mhm. Although, for a character that only has a first name, she's fairly well written, and sometimes I feel like she's a stand-in for Bigelow herself.
Yeah,
Like the scene where they meet each other and he is yelling to her while she's going back into the surf, and he says her his name and she goes, "I don't care." I love that exchange. Like I just wanted you to not fucking die. I don't want to have a meet cute with you.
or there's a point in it when they're at the party at at Bodie's house.
Mhm.
Um, I think of this guy. This guy used to call his dog like Bodie at a school that I went to. Like now I feel like it has to be a Point Break reference,
Has
but
to be, has to
um,
be.
so, like, even at that party at Bodie's house, and they're all around the fire, like, it's the Tyler character that goes, "There's way too much testosterone here," and that's feels like it's Catherine Bigelow or like somebody kind of uh moving
Yes.
the plot away from a point where a male
Yes.
director like Michael Bay or something would have leaned all into it and had like a 30-minute throwdown, which is too easy to do because it's like, how do you.
In fact, this was supposed to originally be directed by Sir Ridley Scott. He was unavailable because he was directing Thelma and Louise instead. So it's not like he chose to do something worse, but I don't think that this film would have been the same at all if Ridley Scott had directed it. What do you think?
I mean, it would have had to be more pretentious. Like, he is somebody that kind of leans into the pretentiousness of some things. I mean, not like, Blade Runner's great, but like,
Yeah.
I feel like he's kind of leaned into his, like, I'm a British man that does like filmmaking, and like, I feel like he's leaned into that more and more as time went on. He did that 3 hour Napoleon movie
Oh,
last year that every single person was like, this is not good.
no, no, and there's a grittiness that comes with Bigelow's, like, experience where she is in her life making films right now that I really think you see in here. To jump to talking about the foot chase scene, I had hinted to the fact that they had made a camera for that, and now that you've seen the scene, what they did was they took a pole, like a broomstick, and they put a camera on the end of it, and then they took a stabilizer off of another camera and put that on it. Then they took a wire frame and put it above the camera, so the guy who was running holding the stick had a general idea of what was in frame by looking at the wire because he couldn't look at the camera, and he just ran. He just ran.
That's amazing. It reminds me though of like the way that it's shot is almost like a GoPro or like like body cam footage that we have now. Obviously, like
Mhm.
in the '90s, that wasn't like a readily available technology, especially not like cinema quality.
No, and I didn't get nauseous while watching these scenes either. The guy did a wonderful job. Even the stabilizer wouldn't have totally compensated for I'm holding an 18-pound camera at the end of a broomstick while running.
I feel like that kind of sequence is copied a lot in like reality TV now, like Cops or something like that, where
Mhm.
they have to run
Yeah.
with cops as they're chasing somebody, and it cuts between a shot from the other side where you're looking from a distance at the cop running, and then to what the cop is seeing. And I
Yes.
love that. I love the fucking image of Patrick Swayze. Well, I mean, body double, I guess, but the Ronald Reagan just pushing that like Mexican lady out of his way, and it's just like, I know it's not supposed to be commentary on on that, but it's like,
Think it kind
I
of
mean,
is.
I mean, I think it's definitely this movie kind of satirizing the machismo of the
Mhm.
entire thing, like Reagan
Mhm.
as the main president of that kind of '80s era, of the Swayze era, really. Like
Mhm.
Reagan as that kind of machismo figure, which is kind of funny because he really was like, if you read autobiographies of him and stuff, it's like, oh no, you're like a little bit of a dandy, huh? Like
Oh,
once you
yeah.
got your but like that machismo thing kind of being satirized by Patrick Swayze being the one at the center of it, dressed as Reagan, and jumping on the table with the gun.
And the scene later on where, like, it's not lost on me that it's Reagan with the gas at the gas station, lighting it on fire, holding the pump on fire, like, that
Yeah.
there's gotta be more than just, "Oh, and it wound up lining up like that."
And the banter between all of the, the ex-presidents or whatever, like, as they rob the bank, like, the Nixon guy going, "I'm not a crook," as he runs out with the fucking peace, the V for Victory
Yes,
signs or whatever. And,
yes,
like, there's just so many good they seem like they were having so much fun robbing banks. Like,
yes.
that's the main take like, I wrote this in my Letterboxd review because gotta log it, gotta log everything.
Gotta log
Uh,
it.
I logged it, like, 4 a.m., and I'm probably gonna go back and be like, "What the fuck was I" But, I one of the things that like the first thing that I thought of while like writing out like a letterbox review was like everybody in the FBI station, right? Like, I mean, probably realistically is a complete asshole. They're all miserable. None of them are having any fun. They hate surfing. They hate when you show up at work with a surfboard. You're not the fun guy. You're the guy that pisses off Dr. Cox. It sucks, right? Like they're all assholes. They're all fucking with each other. Like no one's having a good time. And then you go hang out for 5 seconds with like the guys robbing the bank, and like you slowly realize like because you don't immediately know, but like you slowly realize those are the guys who have robbed all those banks and like like of course like I could have guessed that, but like I mean
Yeah.
I did guess that, but like but like as it kind of dawns fully on you and they're having so much fun. They're like, yo, if a wave takes me I wouldn't even mind. Like they're robbing the banks to hit like better waves in a different part of the world. Like they're having a blast. And it's like you're like your job sucks, Keanu Reeves. Like Johnny Utah, go get a different job. And then finally, like his big revelation at the end is that he just throws the badge away.
Yeah, it's so much going on in this film for the Utah character, who we are basically having a stand-in for. The Utah character is us. This is like the early '90s. Most viewers are working an office job. That whole speech he gives about being in the metal coffin and how they're living to show people. But like it has a kind of a two edge. You start watching it and you're thinking, I want to be these guys. This seems really fun. I don't want to be the Anthony Kiedis, what is it, Warhammer characters, those guys in the
Yeah,
beginning. So well, I'm going to pause here for a second, and then we're just going to talk about that first
I don't
bit.
want I don't want to be Anthony Kiedis in any scenario, but yeah, at
Yes.
least hanging out in California, I guess. But
Exactly. It's a good choice for at least that. And I mean, and everyone else who isn't someone we recognize is a famous surfer who is also kind of an actor. So this movie went
yeah,
out of its way to get real surfers so that most of the surfing scenes has the actual surfers in it.
I really wish Anthony Kiedis is like his Warhammer character though had turned around and been like, I've been at this for 3 months. I've been under the bridge downtown. I drew some blood.
Those come later, so maybe this is what inspires his
That that's
later
been his
livre.
character ever since.
So I was saying to my husband when we were watching it, it's difficult because we all know the story of Point Break. Whether or not you've seen Point Break, you understand that the robber is Swayze and the cop is Keanu Reeves. And yet, this film, which is 2 hours long, has a first bit of a red herring where you are led to believe these other characters might be the robbers. Like, that that's not the case, but was it still enjoyable to watch that?
I mean, I didn't even really like. There's just a lot of surfers that are getting thrown at you. Like I knew
Yeah,
Patrick Swayze was gonna be the one at the head of it, and he has his friends, but
yeah,
like the surfers kind of blended together for me for a good amount
yeah.
of it. I mean, I understood like, oh, there's one group of surfers that are hanging out with Patrick Swayze. There's another group that he doesn't get along with quite as much. That is trying to beat up Keanu Reeves, and he thinks those are the ones that are doing the things. I mean, I obviously knew that it was always going to be Patrick Swayze that was the one like running the ex presidents, but
Mhm.
I was just kind of ready for anything. But they threw a lot of surfers at you in like a short amount of time, and it's like you guys all kind of do look alike.
Yeah. Oh my god, yes. Yes. And I feel like at least that part of it shows us a different version of, like, surfer criminals. And again, this goes back to what you were saying where, like, these guys are just doing this to have fun, whereas the Kiedis version of these people, like, they have machine guns. I do
Yeah,
appreciate the naked woman in the bathroom who's like, "I don't give a shit that I'm naked. I'm still gonna fucking try and take a cop down." She's kicking and fighting. That appreciated that. I did want to give you one little bit of trivia. So everybody had to train a lot with a fight guy in order to do that scene, and
Yeah.
Anthony Kiedis would not come to the trainings. He kept missing them. So on the day of shooting, they refused to allow him to be part of the scene, and that is why his character immediately shoots himself in the foot and is taken out of the fight.
That's great. I
Yeah.
in my head, like watching it, I was like, "That's Anthony Kiedis," but
Yeah,
also
he's
like,
so young.
yeah, and he's way more uptight than his persona, I guess. But so is Keanu Reeves in this. Keanu Reeves is it's weird. It was surreal to see a movie where Keanu Reeves was not the chill, like kind of like, all right,
Mhm.
like like life floats on kind of guy. Like even like having him helm like a John Wick movie, he's still kind of like, oh, you've made him mad, but like that's because he's so chill in general that like it takes so much to make him mad that now
Yes.
he's never gonna stop coming after you. In this movie, it's like he's kind of, I mean, he's open to the idea of surfing, but he's like uptight enough that it's like, oh man, you got to relax a little. Like you got to take a page out of Patrick Swayze's book.
Yeah, just chill just a little fucking bit. It's interesting that you say that because originally Patrick Swayze comes into audition for the character of Johnny Utah, and they tell him like, "You have too much edge, too much je ne sais quoi to be ingenue, to be FBI. You're Bodhi. We don't want to interview anybody else for Bodhi. This makes sense." They did, however, offer the role to somebody before Keanu Reeves, and when I read who it was, I spent a good deal of time just going, "No, no, 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 that would have no, why, no."
Who was it?
Matthew Broderick,
Oh, that's that's a completely different movie.
right?
I
Right?
I'm
Right.
he's just like I've never even got on a surfboard. Like he has like that nervous energy. I could see him
Yeah.
like you couldn't like when he finally does get up on the surfboard. Like you couldn't convince me that Matthew
No,
Broderick did that.
no.
Keanu Reeves is like, yeah, he's clumsy. He's like, he's kind of lovable. Like in this movie, he's kind of an asshole, but like,
Mhm.
he's at least he can. Like, I believe he can get up on a surfboard. I do not think that Matthew Broderick has the dynamic body to be able to do that. Like, he's too broad.
No, and in fairness, despite being from Hawaii, Keanu Reeves had never surfed before, and he trained for 2 months to surf, and Swayze had surfed a little, but not enough, so he trained as well, and, God, the one who's playing Terry, I'm totally spacing on her name right now, it's right here in front of me. Lori Petty had actually never swum before this movie, so everybody's a little fish
He's
out
like
of
you,
water. Yes,
like you.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. There were a few other people who are auditioned that I wanna throw at you right now. I'm gonna give you the ones that make a little sense to me first. They obviously auditioned Johnny Depp at the time. It's 1991. That's pretty similar flavor to Keanu Reeves in my mind, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
see, while watching this, one of the thoughts I had was like, I was thinking about Donnie Brasco,
Yeah. Yeah, actually.
and so that's another like Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp role that he
Yeah,
kind of nailed.
totally. Val Kilmer was another thought, and I think that I would have maybe preferred Val Kilmer as a possibility for Bodhi as opposed to Utah.
He's his face and his like everything about him is so interchangeable with Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, that's kind of
Like I remember a long time ago, like at least I would get the two of them like mixed up when they were young. I mean, 'cause Val Kilmer later, like he kind of aged, and then Patrick
yeah,
Swayze ended up looking exactly the same. Like even when he like wasted away of cancer, he like looked exactly
yeah.
the same. Like
Sadly, cancer got both of them. But that does make me think
yeah,
about Heat, where Pacino and De Niro are pretty similar, but enough to be different. Some, like, could have chased.
but you know that that's Pacino and De Niro, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
you definitely know which one you're looking at.
they could fuck you up by having Al Pacino go, "You talking to me?
It ju-
You talking to you talking to me? You
and
talking
then give me a De
to
Niro going hoo-ha, and I'll be so messed up.
me?"
It's basically
Wah.
the universe where I don't know who played Shazam.
I get Zero's like, "Wah, wah, huh? Wah,"
Wah,
and
wah.
then and then he says, "Wah," and then Al Pacino turns around and goes, "You talking to me?" And then it's the two of them going back and forth.
Honestly, this could be a Super Bowl chips commercial, so somebody take it.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah,
make this.
that's pretty much what the level of that bit was, yeah.
Hey, those things are worth millions of dollars. Don't put down your
True.
Super Bowl commercials. I did want to say they also looked at Charlie Sheen, which makes sense to me because he's a little crazy, but he's also kind of like Major League Charlie Sheen, I could think of, or even Estevez.
Yeah, I think either of them could have done this.
But the last one I want to give you is the one that I'm just like, holy fucking Christ, why? This would have never made sense. Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, that would have never made sense. A while back, like I don't know, like a couple, I guess during the spring, we talked about Spike Lee's Inside Man, and in that movie, they had Willem Dafoe cast as the most normal and mellow cop ever. So he's just like in the security room and he's like, "Sorry, I raised my voice a little bit earlier. I got a little bit agitated or something." And like that's the extent of his like, you know, like the whole time. And it's like this guy is far too weird. Like we even pointed out in the episode, like this guy is far too weird to just be like the normal NYPD cop that is
Yeah.
supposedly looking at the security footage. Like,
Plus, when you get Willem Dafoe wet in any way, like in the scene in Boondock Saints where it's raining, he looks extra crazy. So a movie that's surfing based, where he would be wet most of the time, I'm so glad that in all of those choices they did wind up with Keanu Reeves.
I told you my Willem Dafoe story, right? Uh,
No, I
so
don't think so.
So he comes up here from the city like every once in a while,
Mm.
and the market down the street from I think he has like a house upstate, but the market down the street from my house is like a place where like everybody kind of goes, like a tourist kind of place or whatever. And I think he was living in the Rubber House at the time, which is like near where I live.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, he had a house called the Rubber House. It was like originally made by Tom Pritchard, like
Cool.
architecture, and it was like this crazy house that Willem Dafoe had up here, like 20 minutes away. So he came into town to go do whatever it was with like I guess his wife or like his girlfriend, like whoever it was at the time, and they were leaning over on the car, like making out in the middle of the day at like on like a Saturday or a Sunday at like a pretty much like a farmer's market kind of day. And I was in the car with my dad and like my brother, and my dad laid on the horn and went, "Willem!"
No chill. I love that.
and he kind of jumped and then was like,
Great, great. I think the most effective thing to do when you see someone who is famous, scream their name at them. It freaks them out.
especially if they're having like an intimate moment, like.
Did I tell you about the first time I got recognized for Movie Night Extravaganza?
No, I didn't know anyone ever got recognized for movie extravaganza.
Didn't you get recognized at a bar for Movie Night Extravaganza, or am I imagining another oh, no, maybe I'm imagining another friend. Um, no, yeah, that was a friend who was at a bar who got recognized for his podcast by a girl he was hitting on, and he was just like, "Did my friends hire a hooker to hit on me? Like, this is really too weird."
Like abort.
Abort, yeah, like, I don't know. Uh, I was going to a dispensary in the towns that I live in, and I'm getting out of my car, and I have been sitting in my car for just a couple of minutes, like, getting myself together, making a couple of texts, replying to Movie Night Extravaganza chats, and I look outside the window, and there's this guy who's standing there on his phone, and he's, like, staring at me, but not staring at me, so I'm gonna choose to believe he's not staring at me, and as I get out of my car, he just looks at me, and he goes, "You must be Katie!" Like, he yells it at me, just yells it at me, and what I did was I ran. I ran as far as I could. I ran into the dispensary because dispensaries always have police officers in the front, security guards to keep people and check IDs.
Yeah.
So I ran in and they like put me in the door and they locked it. And we, all of us, paranoid stoners, like snuck looks between the like one-way glass to see if the guy was still standing outside. And he stood there for like 30 minutes and then left. And then I realized through talking to Andy, he was a friend of Andy's and that he knew me from the podcast
I
and
was
was
gonna say, I
just
was gonna
trying to
say,
say hello.
Andy just puts up flyers around the town.
Mhm,
So like,
mhm. And the hair, it's really obvious. I'm super easy to spot, but like, don't scream someone's name at them. It really freaks them out.
I think my dad did it to fuck with him. Like my dad wanted to get that reaction, and it
Yeah,
worked. But
beautiful.
I mean, it worked enough that I remember it all these years later. Like, 'cause this
Love
had
it.
to be when I was like, it had to be around the time that like Spider-Man came out. Like,
Oh wow. Okay, so that's that's the early aughts, I'm thinking.
Because since sold the rubber house. He like sold it for a bunch of money.
Well, maybe if he had been in Point Break, he would have kept it because he'd had all that extra Point Break money. Actually, so Point Break does very, very well. Like I said, it's Catherine Bigelow's best grossing film since except for Zero Dark 30. It makes 90 million. The guy who co-wrote it with the executive producer, Richard King is the executive producer and co-writer. Uh, it's like W. Peter Iliff. Um, he only got paid $6,000 to write this script. He actually waited tables while he was writing this script, and he didn't get any points on the back end. He did get involved in writing the remake, so I'm sure he got better involvement then, but it didn't. I'm not sure it paid out as well. It's a little sad to think the guy who gave us the lines and this wonderful script only made $6,000.
Yeah, and no residuals or anything like that after the fact, or like,
No, took the flat fee.
damn. Yeah, Zero Dark 30 is one of those movies that I'm don't like, definitely like, not gonna watch, not gonna appreciate. Like, it just seems like the fucking opposite of anything that I'd ever want to watch.
Oh my god.
It's like it's straight up like it's literally fucking CIA propaganda. There's been multiple podcasts that have just dissected it point by point, being like, yeah, this isn't any part of what happened. Like, number one, we just gave Pakistan money to find Osama bin Laden. Like, we didn't like there wasn't some great chase where it was like we need to, we need to buckle down, and then finally like the Navy SEALs find him and raid the compound. No, like we just said, hey, can we pay you, Pakistan? And finally they didn't have any more use for him, so they're like, yes, here, we'll tell you where he is. And then that, like, even that kind of just destroys the point of of the authority.
It's so frustrating because we want to get our history in movie form because we like it. It's video, it's easier. But even if you look at stuff like the movie Troy is not an accurate representation of the inaccurate representation we kind of have of what have might have happened. Like we're terrible every time it goes through a new iteration. We're like, cut that shit off. It's not important. Who cares if it's accurate to what it used to be?
Yeah, but like in the case of like Zero Dark 30, like it was a
Is it
very
intentional?
conscious, it
Yeah.
was a very conscious choice for the US intelligence and Navy SEALs, and like, our those arms of our government who were deeply unpopular at the time, partially because they had not tracked down Osama bin Laden until 2011, right? Like there was an entire decade
Yeah.
where everyone's like, "Oh, he's in Pakistan. He's in Pakistan. He is in Pakistan." Like John Stewart, I remember, was had a whole bit where he was pointing to like Pakistan, being like, that's like everybody knew that's where fucking Osama bin Laden was. And obviously there's like territorial sovereignty, and Pakistan would kind of just throw somebody out there like
Mhm.
from Al Qaeda or whatever and be like, that's the number. They always say the number 3 Al Qaeda guy, so
Yeah.
that we could have oh, we've got the number 3 Al Qaeda guy again. I don't know why they didn't just say number 2, but whatever. Like, so finally after a decade, they like managed to pay off Pakistan, and they said, oh yeah, all right, well, he's in this this compound, and then they got him, and like, but like that is part of the reason why they had to launder their reputation as, on top of the ultimately incredibly destructive drone strikes inside of Pakistan that we've been doing over and over again. That was People were starting to be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't just be killing fucking civilians. They also had that story where a guy got behind the wheel of a car and hit two Pakistani like pedestrians or
Mm.
something, and but he made it to the U.S. embassy, so he got no charges.
Oh my god. Yes, well, so the temptation to want to look at film as being documentary, it's difficult to get anything from a story of a film and not worry that it is propaganda, especially something that like this where it clearly is going to be propaganda. Even Band of Brothers is going to be propaganda. Anything that is a war movie by its nature is going to be propaganda, which is why I can see what people like Eileen Jones, they don't really like war movies. It's always going to
Yeah,
have an agenda. And even our documentaries since, let's say, post Columbine, that documentary by
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. We've kind of moved
Yeah,
away from documentaries being unbiased and reliable representations as well. So, I guess what I'm saying here is, anybody watching Zero Dark 30 really should stop and wonder that this is obviously can't be a representation of what really happened, and
yeah.
they should look it up. Always double check your shit.
Well, it was around the same time they also did American Sniper,
Oh god, that
and
one's
like
really
another fucking
propaganda.
Navy SEAL story, yeah.
Holy
And
fuck.
so it was like there's a time period within the ironically enough within the Obama administration because I feel like Obama doesn't really get
Mhm.
as much like slack for being like a jingoistic freak with his administration or whatever, but like there was a lot of like a conscious effort from the military that wasn't doing so well. I
Mhm.
mean, in any of their conflicts, wasn't doing what they at least had set out to do, and the intelligence community to start trying to influence movies and start trying to
Yeah.
make more propaganda movies that are like flashy and like have a lot of stars and like are so I think so gritty and like kind of disturbing and like gripping that you no longer think about, hey, is this real or not? You're just kind of taken in by it, like
Mhm.
and like one of the craziest fucking examples of like this kind of meddling within Hollywood movies was actually The Interview, the Seth Rogen and James Franco movie, where they had a guy that was like high up in the foreign policy circles. That this story didn't get reported on until like 2 years later, but he actually helped write the script for The Interview, and it was and the guy had been working for like I don't remember if it was like the Foundation for Defense of Freedom or something. He was one of those like real ghoulish guys that like
Wow.
was trying to like set up like a realistic scenario that you could take out Kim Jong Un in a movie,
Oh.
and so like there was a high intensity effort, and like and it's understandable. I mean, looking at it from like an objective standpoint, like military recruitment is way down. There's a lot of like all the best war movies are anti-war movies, at least for the war that they're
Mhm.
that they're made about. Like, so there has to be a real effort to restructure the way that culturally we look at the American Empire, and
Mhm.
movies are a great way to do that because you could have a million fucking slate and like like all of those kinds of articles that are like actually like this is not what happened, and then like I mean I just did that too like but people aren't going to read that as much as they're going to watch the movie. They're going to be like, yeah, well,
For
yeah.
example, I'm in a movie. I did a week as a CIA, one of those people that goes through the forensic analysis. So I'm in the background. I'm like checking out stuff for the Boston bombing movie that came out in 2016 called Patriots Day, starring Mark Wahlberg. I did say it was a Boston movie, so of course it stars Mark Wahlberg. But the movie, which barely came out after the bombing, postulates that like this one motherfucker is who solved the case, found the guy, and is the reason that this all went down and we caught him. And like everybody working on the film lives in Boston, is from the area, and experienced the bombing and knows exactly what actually fucking happened. But, we're getting paid to make this movie, so we're making this movie.
Well, and like on top of that, right, like there was like the redditors kind of came out in full force to try to identify the Boston bomber, uh and accidentally like in the process of that there was like a dozen other people that
Yeah.
got swept up in that, like, oh, it's that guy, oh, it's this guy, oh, it's that guy, and now that's kind of like the open source slash like there's a lot of like intelligence news kind of places that do like pretend to do at least like citizen journalism that kind of feel like they've taken off since the Boston bomber story, that it's like, yeah, but like this feels like a lesson of why that should be vetted a lot more carefully than
Yes.
whatever the fuck you guys are doing.
Yes. So, just getting back onto the movie Point Break, we're talking a lot about politics and morality, and I think that might be a good time to segue into the morality questions of Point Break, because I think when I watched this younger, I was aware of like, oh, it's a cop versus a robber. But now as I watch this as an older person, I feel like it's more like Heat, which came out after this, and I definitely think was influenced. I definitely think Man was influenced by parts of this film. It's more of a like, what what would you what do you actually consider to be good? Like in Steppenwolf, what is the cost of believing in the law to the T and being a kind of person who does what you're told to do by God or by society or by expectations versus being, say, an artist or being someone who lives freely?
What is the there's like a good quote that he says in this that Bodhi says where he's like we're not going to be subjected to the law, we're going to be the master, or like
Mhm.
we're not going to be, yeah, it was like a, I can't remember what the I wrote it in my notes, but then I didn't open my notes, which I never do.
It's okay. So you know what? I do this thing at the end called corrections and omissions, and I'll get it to the people correctly then. But we have the context of it in right now, and I do know what you're talking about. It's much more compelling of a robber story in that way, because you wind up asking yourself, like, okay, what is Bodhi doing that is really that bad? You know, like, he's just kind of living to be free, and that's so much better than the FBI.
Why be a servant to the law when you can be its master? By the way,
Boom, that's what it
I
saved
will
me
not
the work.
fact check.
Yeah.
I'll fact check myself.
Boom. No, I appreciate that. I save it, fix it in post is what I tried to say, and you're like, no, we'll get it now. Exactly. And so there's really an alluring aspect to what Bodhi is selling us, even though as we continue to watch, like, it's incredibly selfish. It is an incredibly selfish way to
Yeah.
exist, right?
And it's not even the classic, like, would you steal bread to save your family?
No.
They're taking that and going skydiving and surfing with it.
Yeah. They're just having a good fucking time, and they don't want to have to work a dime. And we see Tyler, Lori Petty's character, working at a restaurant. She surfs as much as she wants to. They could just get a job, maybe even at that restaurant. But no, they rob banks and they skydive and they fucking just have a blast.
I think it's not just the complete, like, kind of corrosion of society that makes something like like Bodhi's whole spiel about, it's us versus the system kind of
Yeah.
appealing.
Yeah.
I think it's also like you're subjected to, like, this extreme, like, assholery of the FBI office,
Mhm.
where it's like a bunch of, like, the cops in this are not, like, big burly guys that run through, like, even like Gary Busey's like the burliest guy there. Like, these cops are all like kind of skinny, nervous, freakish kind of guys, including like Dr. Cox, who John C. McGinley's great at that kind of thing, where he's just frenetic energy nonstop, and he, like, unless you punch him in the face like
Yeah.
Gary Busey does, he never stops talking.
Respect your elders.
Yeah, everybody's an asshole. They won't let you bring a surfboard into the office.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's the thing that I keep coming back to, but I was like, I was watching it. I was like, damn, they're so I hate they won't even let you bring a surfboard to the office.
No,
Like,
it did remind me, and maybe because we were just talking about Shane Black on Movie Night on our Nice Guys episode, it did remind me of the kind of guy, the captain in Lethal Weapon. The, like, always, no matter what they do, this guy is yelling at them, and he's always upset. I mean, in the scene where they accidentally bust the Anthony Kiedis guys instead of the correct the Bodhi's guys, he's yelling at them for mistaking this, and yet, like, John C. McKinley's character signed off on the search warrant. He's the reason they're there. You should have known. This isn't the FBI and the CIA. It's two FBI investigations in the same area,
Yeah.
and they didn't talk to each other.
I think the other thing on top of that, it's anytime they kind of, like, you join the FBI, at least in, like, movie world, right? Like, I think a lot of people that join the FBI are kind of just assholes that want to be assholes. But let's say, like, in movie logic, right? Like, you join the FBI because it's fun. It's like you get to do all these things. You get to go undercover. And every time he tries to break out of this really narrow, thing that they put in front of him, like, it's not even like one of those things where it's like, God damn it, you're good, but like, as a cop, but you break all the rules. Like, it's not even that. Like, every time he breaks out of that mold even slightly, like, tries to do anything, tries to solve this series of bank robberies, like, anytime that happens, the guy is yelling at him and being an asshole.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't give him a chance to do anything. You have to think, like, if you're like a young man, because everybody's kind of older than he is at the FBI in this movie. Like, he joins as a young man, full of energy, ready to go, ready to catch bank robbers. And every time he tries to do anything, unorthodox, besides just, like, talk to people on the beach or whatever, even that they're kind of assholes about. They're like, you came into work late, like, which is really like, if you read any books about, like, J. Edgar Hoover's, like, FBI, like the early FBI, that really is how it was. Like, it was literally the most uptight motherfuckers in the
Oh,
government.
God.
Like, but, like, it's honestly a lot like how it was in Boardwalk Empire. Like, it's that kind of guy. The is his name
Steve
Michael
Buscemi's
Shannon? No, what's the
character?
guy?
Oh,
No, there's the guy that's like the extremely puritanical like FBI guy that's chasing him down.
isn't that Michael Shannon?
Michael Shannon.
Yeah.
Michael Shannon. Yeah. I couldn't, for some reason my brain was like, that's not Michael Shannon, but I knew it was. But yeah, the Michael Shannon character, like that kind of uptight puritanical. Like, a lot of the people they hire to these agencies are like Mormon. So they're like complete teetotaler, like uptight, like Jesus freak kind of
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
and they do that on purpose. There actually is an intelligence reason why you hire people like that, because they already have subverted their own identity to like a larger group. That's like
Mhm.
the logic behind it.
Mhm.
But like it's that kind of person. So like this movie does that well, but they've kind of brought in like this young guy, and it's like the era of like, I mean, Donnie Brasco will come out a couple years later as a movie like undercover kind of stuff. Like people, like everybody loves fucking Serpico. I mean, me too.
Me too.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
But but like that kind of thing where you go undercover and like you're doing this cool stuff and you're investigating. You're sometimes even investigating the people that are also investigating. Like you know what I mean? Like that's the mentality you go into this with. And then every time he steps, he even has a surfboard. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing with that surfboard? I don't like you. I don't like your attitude. I don't like that surfboard. And I hate the way you're running this investigation."
Yes, yes. I do you ever play Dungeons and Dragons?
Uh, yes, but not like as a like I've jumped in on people's games and
Okay.
when they're
I'll just I'll introduce this mostly for the audience then. It really made me think of the chart that explains people's alignments, where you're either lawful, neutral, chaotic, or good, neutral, evil. Um,
yeah.
and it's like you want to believe that Bodhi is like neutral good or chaotic good, where he's just doing good, and we have Johnny Utah as like lawful good. He's gonna do everything that the law, or even just lawful neutral, where like he doesn't assign any kind of value to it. He just wants to do what the law is, but he keeps coming up against the alignment chart and being like, actually a little bit of chaos might be better, and is this actually good, or is this really neutral or lawful? And so at the end, when he goes to just like throw the badge into the sea, it's almost like he's giving up the entire system, because he had to have Bodhi pay, but he knew that he couldn't actually bring Bodhi to jail, and so like the mercy thing is to let him do suicide by wave.
I love that too. Cause I had that same thought. I was like, that's suicide by it's not suicide by cop. It is suicide by sea. Like
And but like when for you, when you saw that and he's asking, "I wanna go out and I wanna get this wave. It's my whole life. Everything I've been doing is up to this." Knowing that like people died, he was a bit of a shit to get to this point. Maybe he doesn't deserve it. Did you feel like you wanted Utah to let him have that, or did you feel like you wanted Utah to
yeah,
finally get him called in?
I was rooting for Bodie.
Ah, you were reading for Bodhi.
I didn't want him to go to jail at all. I
Ah,
don't want anyone to go to jail really. I mean, I
yeah,
don't know. But like but just from the moment he said it's not tragic to die doing what you love.
yeah,
Now I have my notes up. But like just from that moment I knew like at the end he's gonna die from
yeah,
a wave.
yeah,
Like, he has to,
yeah.
because you can't say something, like, kinda prophetic like that and then be like, "And then he went to jail for 20 years." I'm just like,
And he rotted in
I
a
just also
cave.
I think that guy is surviving in jail. Like, I don't think that guy's not capable of getting, like, a regular job either. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's too much frenetic, like, sociopathic, but also kind of well, I mean, I guess sociopathic is a good term for it, because sociopaths kinda draw you in with their like,
Yeah.
they're very good at, like, getting you to see things the way they see it, which is a totally skewed and illogical reality, but, like I said illogical, didn't say logical. But a very skewed and illogical reality, but, like, can sound very good coming from the mouth of an extremely charming person.
Oh my god, yes, and he uses the, like, Buddhist chill religion laid backedness as, like, God, to justify some pretty evil shit.
That's what almost all white people that use that kind of Buddhist language, though. You're always like, "Okay, what's on the other side of this?"
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I mean, they're stepping over the dead bodies of their compadres in the heist that goes bad, and they're saying to each other, "Hey, you can't take it with you," which is meaning, like, when you die, you can't take riches and things with you, but they're literally meaning, like, "We can't take this guy's body with us." And they're like,
yeah.
"Oh, you guys don't fucking get it," but he just keeps using that to keep people moving forward for his end goal, which is to surf that wave. So there is an air of me that is, like, maybe a little too lawful and a little bit too, like, "Oh, really? Well, I got you before you got to, bitch, and get in that cage."
Well, there's like a I yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that guy would have survived jail in that movie at the
No.
end of it, and I was kind of rooting for him. I do think that is a completely sociopathic and like narcissistic way to live. But I mean, I also like I wouldn't say I'm like a connoisseur of the heist film, but like I'm someone who very much enjoys that genre.
Hmm.
Like maybe not so much like the ones from the 2000s. There's like a lot of them that came out at the same time, and I was kind of bored of it. But like the 1950s one, right? Like ones like the Killing, the first Kubrick's first film, like that kind of thing where it's like I really enjoyed the methodical nature of like putting together the heist, and then but like the way that they sell it is always like, oh, we'll be in and out, nobody's gonna get hurt, like this can't go wrong. I found the perfect heist plan, and like of course it's teeing up for every single thing to go wrong, but like that is how every single movie, every character that's a
Hmm.
bank robber sells their bank robbery. Like they're like nothing can go wrong. We'll be in and out, like no one will get hurt. I have the perfect plan. And you know that none of those four things are true, but you're like, I want to see how this goes. Like I want to see how this ends.
And always there's like, I got these three guys that I like, and this fourth guy who's new, and I'm not sure about yet. And you're like, oh, he's either a cop or he's gonna start shooting people for no reason. Like it's a formula, but it is a formula that often, you know what? I'm like, hey, as the heist cliche goes, you son of a bitch, I'm in.
I I love that Rick and
I
Morty
love that Rick
episode.
and Morty episode too. It's hard not to.
I yeah, like I think that it's the same kind of thing with like a slasher film when you're like, look, I've seen enough slasher
Mm,
films and everyone's gonna die, and there's gonna be a final girl probably, like, but the girl that like showed any sexual interest in anyone, she's gonna get killed. The black guy's gonna get killed. If there's a gay character, he's gonna get killed. Like that 100%. The teenagers fooling around in the back of the thing, but you're like, I'm kind of curious to see how the kills go. And it's the same thing with heist movies. It's like
mhm.
when they put together that plan, it's like, okay, I want to see how you're going to rob this bank. I want to see how you get the cameras to turn off. I want to see how you get the whole system to give you the money. Like I want to see all of that. And even if I've seen it 1,000 times, now if you do the same thing that a bunch of other movies did, it's going to be like, all right, this is kind of boring.
But if you have a new angle on it, shoot it at me. I'm kind of interested to see it. And that's why I think Heat works, because it can feel a little bit like Heat is a lot like Gross Point Blank without, I'm sorry, a lot like Point Break without the surfing. But at this point where we're talking about right at the end, where this mercy kill happens and this decision is made, that's not how Heat ends. Heat ends with the cop taking him down because if he's not, he's going to get killed himself. And I feel like that is Man's version of what we're talking about here, where he's like, this is a cool formula, and I have a little bit of a different way to do it. Let's try this.
There's been a lot of writing about heat and like the idea of like, well, like Mark Fisher wrote about the idea of heat and like I mean capitalist realism and like the idea of like the neoliberal destruction of like community,
Hmm.
which is like the earlier mob movies. You're in a family, like you have a family, and it's called a family, and like yes, they kill each other, but they're like an organization. There's a structure to it, and it's kind of like the way that our whole economy worked in like a Fordist method, where you're in it for life. And in Heat, they take all of that away, so they're just kind of these stagnant like singular organisms kind of floating in space, and that just happen to come together for this same amount of time, don't have necessarily like loyalty to each other or to an organization or any of that, right? Like it's kind of the neoliberal system. Like they're atomized individualist actors doing this rather than like like the more I guess permanent, although sometimes completely permanent because they fucking kill you. Like the idea of like a mob family, like
Yeah.
Casa Nostra, like kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just very interesting how these movies are different and yet so similar. They use this heist, they use this bank robber, they use this like two guys who are almost the same. One is good and one is evil, but who is evil and who's actually good and what's the tension between them to paint these commentaries on our society at the time. It's just we're talking about an action movie and yet there's nuance and there's so much layer in there that this is why I think of this movie as a movie to show someone who's like, I don't really know if action movies are always where they kind of seem boring and dumb sometimes.
And I think that something that I appreciated and had fun about this movie, like watching it, right? Like putting yourself in the mentality of the early '90s and how completely racialized crime was at that point, right? Like the idea of like, I mean, you have like mainstream Democratic politicians pushing like the crime bill and saying like, the black kids are like super predators, or like, these like the idea of gangs, like gangs are taking over America, and there's all these
Oh
like
God, yeah.
anti-gang PSAs and anti-drug PSAs, and this movie kind of allowed itself not to fall into any of that. Like, I mean, they're white guys on the beach surfing that look like any other fucking
Mhm.
white guys on the beach, and they're in these like kind of surfer gangs, and they kind of have like some of them have like drug connects, but like not really in a way that you ever tangibly kind of explore besides the Anthony Kiedis thing. And it's like it just feels like it feels a lot more fun because it feels completely I guess taken away from the things that in movies like this can get really reactionary and really I don't know, like cringeworthy and like hard to watch really fast.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I think the movie's timeless for that reason because like the crime is not like some kind of racialized monstrosity. Even when they're like, oh, like the big thing in LA at this point, it's the bank robbery capital of the world or whatever right now, or the country, and it's like there's no like racial identity to bank robbers. Like you like
Exactly.
to the point where like every movie now that does a heist thing, they're all like a nice multicultural group where everybody comes from like a different,
It's like a United Benetton ad.
yeah. But I think that this movie stands up and is going to stand up, over the test of time for that reason, and because it's like it's also there's something so comically '90s about having gangs of surfer like do they have like turf? Like, are they on different parts of the beach? Like, you're on my part of the beach, bro. Like,
Don't you surf that wave? I call dibs. And it
yeah.
is really interesting to have that sort of feeling of like it is definitely a 90s movie. It's definitely a location specific movie. And yet don't remake it. It is good in that aspect. It still works today despite those aspects. It works in part because of those aspects.
So one line that I wanted to point out,
Yeah.
I guess, John Utah says, "Is this the part where you say that yuppie insects like me shouldn't be surfing?" And the guys go, "That would just be a waste of time. We just gonna fuck you up."
Oh my god. Yeah. That's that it's you're hitting the nail on why I asked about like do you feel like those characters should be in even though it's a red herring that we all know is a red herring from point 1? And I'm like, yeah, because those fucking scenes are hilarious and I enjoy them very much.
Yeah. Well, I just also think, I mean, you have to be thrown into into the milieu, right? Like you have to be thrown into
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, you have to see that they're not all great.
or like even just there's a whole underground community of these
Mhm.
different groups, and like some of them are involved in drug trafficking, and some of them were involved in bank robbery, but they're all surfers, and like you have to have more than just the four surfers and girl Tyler. That you have
Yeah.
more than that to kind of get you into that milieu, or else you're like, huh, it's weird that there just happens to be four criminals that surf, but like no, it's like the entire community of the LA surfing scene are like, yeah, we moonlight as criminals, but like we're surfers first. Like that's
Yeah, it would be too much, like, so he just becomes a surfer and immediately walks into the surfers who are robbing people. So you're right, it needs to be there.
well, he goes into the whole party, and the party is like pot. Like there's clearly like a whole
Oh,
scene
tons of them.
that is there. Like
But
yeah,
I do have, like, white boy blindness in that party scene where you're just like,
oh yeah.
is this 20 people, or are they just sending the same guy at me, like, 6 times and I don't notice?"
It's four white people in a room with a bunch of mirrors.
Well, Ridley Scott, very famously in The Duelist, would do scenes with a tent, and he would set the tent up halfway and shoot out the tent flap that way, and then just turn the camera around, and it would be a different location. He would also have the same extras walk in front of the flap, then like change their pants, send them back through, and change your shirt, send them back through because they didn't have a very big budget and they didn't have very many extras.
Well, that's why it was brilliant that we did our Lord of the Rings episode, and we got to talk about the entire thing where you could just use CGI to like create a crowd scene,
Ah,
like the crowd sequence thing. Yeah,
as a background actor, I have to be like, no. Um,
yeah, but I mean, I don't see it.
I don't want. No one wants to do
It
that.
doesn't take away work from because all right, at least the way that it's been used, like in like TV projects, where that's most of where it's been
Mhm.
used. It's not like The Walking Dead, which is jumped on that. Like The Walking Dead jumped on that kind of software like no other, and then in fact helped develop another kind of software to compete with Peter Jackson. And but it's not like, oh, no one's getting gigs as a zombie anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, probably more zombie gigs now than in the last 20 years, definitely true.
yeah. So I do see what you're saying, but like
Yeah.
I think they use it because it's like you can't you shouldn't at least overuse that kind of software. You can tell after a while, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
same zombies are kind of coming at you, like or the same orcs or whatever. They use it in situations where they can't fill in the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something to be said about this would be the weirdest take I can give you on this pro. All of that special effects when you have to put them on background actors is disposable plastic and plasticine, and it gets into the water system. So by using CGI, which may well take more engine power than this, like there might be a less environment. Like, which one's worse environmentally? I speculate maybe the effects, but either way, it's a digression.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, what is your favorite scene in the film?
Let me try to think about it. I mean, I like the scene where I do like the scene where it's they start fucking him up, and then Bodhi comes out and starts kicking everybody's ass like Roadhouse
Roadhouse.
style because I fucking love
I
Roadhouse.
immediately shouted, "Roadhouse!" Like, he used what he learned. There's no doubt in my mind.
Roadhouse is a movie that could have used a Catherine Bigelow
Yeah. Oh, both
on set
both of them coulda used a Catherine Bigelow. Any iteration coulda used one. Oh, man.
to just be like, wow, a lot of testosterone here, huh?
I will admit that I watched the remake of Roadhouse, and there are at least 5 moments where the director and writer decided to be incredibly self-aware and put in a little bit of a joke about that, and they are hilarious. It is hard to make it through a movie that long for 5 moments of like, "Huh, you know you're stupid." So I won't recommend it, but I will say that at least they tried.
They had Conor McGregor do one of them, right?
Yeah,
I just-
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and they give Jake Gyllenhaal one. They got me to laugh a couple times. I thoroughly enjoyed the skydiving scenes. I thought that they were
yeah,
hilarious
they're
and
so
great.
gay.
Yeah.
They're so gay. Like in
It's
like a, I'm so saying that positively, but like
yeah,
they're so homoerotic. Like,
we're
because
bonding.
I watched my like working thesis is like, okay, this is clearly like a kind of like a romance film, like in the same way that I think something like Heat, right? Like
Mhm, yeah.
or a movie like The French Connection,
Mhm.
where it's like there's like a mastermind and there's a cop, and they can't really survive without each other, and like they're kind of they complete each other almost. But this movie takes that and then adds like Catherine Bigelow's kind of romantic comedy sensibility to it, which I appreciated. But I think that the guys jumping out and all holding hands as they skydive is like, I was like, all right, like you guys are really
It immediately made me think of the volleyball scene in Top Gun,
yeah.
where, like, it's male bonding, but it's also a little homoerotic.
It it reminded me of the scene that, although it's really funny, made me sad when I was little. The scene in Zoolander where they're it's Zoolander and his like three roommates or whatever, and they all are in the car together and they're like dancing and then they spray
The
each other with the
gas
gas.
fight, the gasoline fight.
Yeah, and then it all. I was sad. I was like, oh, he lost his friends.
Yes, it is, it is. It's a dual scene because it is sad, but it is also pretty funny.
But I felt like I felt like Bodhi and his three friends were a lot like Zoolander and his three friends.
To a certain degree. There's God, that's great. That is a great comparison.
I could have seen like all of them spraying each other with gasoline, like as they're skydiving.
Just
Like
having a little fun. NBG. Uh,
Scott was like, no, and then the whole
oh my god. That, scene was also accomplished through creating, camera stuff. They hung the actors that were talking, like, so basically the scenes between Swayze and, Keanu Reeves, they're hung on a rig, a big rig for each one of them and another rig for the camera next to them, and then they put a big fan underneath them and turned it on, so it's like in their faces, but they're actually just like 10 feet off the ground, going like this, blah, with their arms.
now they probably use the if they did it like now, you can use one of those zero gravity things that you
Yes!
can use one of those, but you can green screen around it, so it looks like you're the person. Anyway, that's what I mean. Like I've seen photos of like film shoots where they kind of do
I
that.
have a friend who does, she's a circus performer and she does ballroom dancing inside those, her and her partner. They get shot up in the air and they dance in the air tunnel. It's lovely.
The first one, this is kind of mean, but the first time I ever saw one of those, I was watching that Viceland show where Action Bronson goes around the world and eats. He and like his other kind of overweight friends go around the world and eat. Fuck, that's delicious, like that show.
Yeah.
And he went in one of those things, and I was like, "There's no way this is gonna work."
Did it? Did it
But it
work?
did.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's physics, man. It'll get you. Did you have a least favorite scene?
Um, I mean, see now I gotta look at my notes. I mean, the Anthony Kiedis part was a little bit, I feel like, over the top. His like characterization of that character. I mean, it's fine, but like,
Yeah.
there wasn't anything that I really was like, "Hey, you should cut this" or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
like I mean, it's all pretty crazy. I'm sure you could have cut down some of the bank robbery scenes if you wanted to make it like under 2 hours. But like, I don't know. I don't think that there was like a lot of banter in this movie. There's like a shitload of banter, and like I'm sure it's not all necessary, but like fuck it.
That's the thing is I didn't remember it being 2 hours. I watched it with a very critical eye, seriously trying to be like, "I wanna cut 20 minutes from this. What could I cut?" And I don't think I could cut anything without affecting it in a negative way where that 20 minutes isn't worth sitting for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we stock consecutively. I think there's a lot of scenes you can probably cut down,
Yeah.
in the way that they do to like 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there. But I mean, if it works, it works. It's not like it's 2.5 hours. It's like a nice hour, 50 minutes, I think, and then credits. Like,
Yeah. And even in the scenes where you can tell Keanu Reeves is very new to acting, like the scene where he's with Gary Busey and he's telling Gary Busey, like, well, fuck you, then why don't you just retire, you old shitbag? And like he's yelling in his face, and Gary Busey gets really upset and he's like, yeah, see,
yeah.
now that you, even the stilted quality of the delivery in that, I was like, no, leave it in. I love it.
See, I didn't feel like that was that stilted. I was like, all right, he's baiting Gary Busey, which if you've looked at him recently, doesn't seem like it's that hard to do. But
He's great. You know that he was a little hard to control on set and a lot of his lines are ad-libbed?
uh, doesn't surprise me. Uh,
Right?
the one, I love the lawyers don't surf, and then he goes, this one does. I love that line.
There's a lot of very quotable lines in this movie. I watched it on YouTube Movies Censored, and I can't and that's how I know there are 105 times that they say "fuck" in this movie, and, like, they even blurred out the butt where you see the tan line, no boobs, nothing, like, "Oh, this movie curses a lot," and I enjoyed it, but I never noticed how much.
I told you that I watched. There's a free YouTube version of RoboCop.
What is it,
That
like 10 minutes long?
no, like yeah, I made the mistake, and then I was watching. I was like, "There's no way this is the whole movie," and then it was like, "Oh no, this is the TV version of it." There's so I'll say this. I'll do the opposite track and say rather than cutting stuff out, right? I would probably boost up the scenes between him and girl Tyler and
Yes!
kind of make that a little bit more believable
Yes.
because I there was no like there's no connection, and then they don't part of it that they don't explain that I feel like that should have been worked up to a little bit is like she's like, I'm not paying any attention to this guy. He's a square, which is very funny to say about like Keanu Reeves, but like he's a square. Then he's like, well, my parents died in a car accident. She's like, wow, it's almost like he knew that my parents died in a plane crash, like that whole bit. And then next thing you know, like they're at the party and they're like holding hands, and it's like I'd like this courtship to be built up a little bit more than just like you guys meet, you surf a bunch, and then like I don't know, like it felt like, but I mean, but that kind of I guess makes sense if it's not a romantic movie. I mean, not whether or not it's intended that way. Like it's not a romantic movie really between girl Tyler and Johnny Utah. It's really it's Johnny Utah and Bodie kind of having a relationship. I think.
So much so that you are verbatim saying what I said to my husband at the end of watching it. I said, I really feel like either they needed to just make her a friend or dial it back a little or fully develop it and make it make sense so that they really, really care for each other and this ending makes sense at all. And she shows up even in the end part.
Yeah, he kind of was like, "Okay, you good?" No, he kind of was like, "Okay, you good? Yeah, you good. Alright, I'm gonna go take care of this guy now," and, like, walks off and you
Yeah,
never
I'm
see
just
her
gonna go
again.
travel the globe for a couple years until I find him. It's cool, but I'm
Yeah.
glad that, you got totally captured and traumatized because of our relationship together. And then having her run to him in virginal white.
Oops, sorry, I guess I'm not ready for any big commitments. I'm not over some stuff that happened to me in that
Sorry, bra.
helicopter,
Sorry,
so
bra. I gotta go chase my real love. So, like, but he said what my husband said was pretty valid. This is a movie from 1991. There is no version of what I just described that gets funding from a studio. They need a heteronormative love story to say that the story between Bodhi and Utah is obviously not what's happening because he falls in love with a girl. You see it, it happens, even though she's pretty androgynous.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying, like, if there was something that I would change about it, right? Like, like, rather than cutting parts of it, I would add, like, more to that part of it.
I think it was added in just to satisfy studio executives, and that's why it is added in so perfunctory and so, like, not effectively, and you're right, like, I think if you wanted to add it in.
She's a decent plot device in 2 ways. She gets him into the world of surfing, and then he meets all those cool and interesting people doing cool and interesting things. And then in the end, like, why does he continue to be with I mean, I guess the alternative version without her is he's just so enamored with Patrick Swayze, like, the Bodhi character that he just sticks with them and like he can't break his gaze or whatever. And I think that is more of what it was than actually giving a shit about, her as she's really like the whole like line he's giving her is like, oh well, this guy's so crazy. I left her with the crazy guy that I know that's so crazy that if I don't show up here, he's gonna kill her, even if I say don't do it. And it's like, why would you leave
Yeah,
anyone with that guy? Like
yeah.
where do you know this guy from? And where what's his
That really does
story?
drive home that he is a complete douche.
I have this psychotic, yeah, well, I have a psychotic guy that I kinda know, and I'm gonna take my ex-girlfriend and let him tie her up, and then I said, "If I'm not back in 6 hours, kill
Doesn't
that
everybody
bitch."
have that guy?
And it's like, Jesus Christ, this is like a crazy escalation too, like, he's like, "Hey, now that we've had skydiving together, come here, I
Yes,
gotta show you something."
yes, and so it does feel like a strange motivation that could have been written a little differently, but, like, it still ultimately works, and I do appreciate Lori Petty's character. I like the scene when they're lying in the bed, and you see her, like, back muscles are so incredibly strong, and you see his chest muscles are so incredibly strong, and there's this, like, way of showing them together where you understand that both of them are pretty strong characters, and that's kind of why I resent the virginal white PJ run to him at the end thing that we wind up with that character. It feels like she was cooler than
Well,
that.
but then you get, Cody shows up in their thing, and then he's shirtless too, and it's like that's like one of those moments I was like, "Alright, this is a bit on the nose."
Although everybody has, like, very feathered lady hair, all the surfer guys have, like, my mom's hair from the '80s.
I'm, not saying this as like a, I mean, look, I think all of what you're saying is valid about, that
Mhm,
character, like, and what your husband said is valid
mhm.
about that character. But it is kind of funny that like Catherine Bigelow was like, she came on the scene being the big like, oh, like more women in movies, like, like representation on that spectrum and stuff. And then the one character in this movie that's like a woman still gets the short shrift, like still gets, like it's still
Oh, yeah, in fact,
unoriginal.
the only line a woman delivers to another woman is like, when she's the woman in the party with the lime, and she's like, "I taught him that." Like, that's it. Like, forget about did they talk about another guy, like, our women don't talk to each other in this universe. But, there's only so much you can push the, envelope forward at this particular point in time, and I think yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was
Oh,
spitballing on,
yeah.
like if I had to do it. I mean, I think it works. I think it works the way it does. I think it works way better, like with the subtext that it's like, these dudes are kind of gay for each other, like, and like maybe that's almost like metaphorical rather than sexual in a weird way. Like he's so attracted to what Bodhi represents, but like I don't know, some of those looks he gives them are pretty gay.
It's definitely on the edge of both of those things. Why can't it be both? And
Yeah.
and and yeah. So basically, I think it's funny that both of us are like, actually, I would have added a little bit of time for this character because she's awesome and it could have been a more rounded. I completely agree with you.
And I mean, look, I mean, she gets screen time that's not utilized for
Yeah.
her character, like being in bed with him, or like that's his own centered moment, or like being at the party with him on his like. There's there's moments of time that I think just adding certain lines, or like adding just some like a moment of dialogue probably could have boosted her character a little
Yeah.
bit more, because it's like more than Bodhi saying she's a wild one, bro, every time she does kind of like
Or when he's with the
incomprehensible.
other lady cop, lady FBI agent, and they're looking at her height and her weight, and she's the lady agent's like, "Damn, son!" Like, it's just numbers, lady.
Yeah, but that's the one thing that people at the FBI are very good at, is getting sexually attracted to numbers.
Numbers.
I mean, they're literal
Yeah,
analysts. Like,
yeah. So as we approach the end of the episode, gonna ask the 3 questions I normally ask. Did you enjoy this movie?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I
I
think
think you could
that's
tell.
one to tell.
I've been asking that, and it's yeah, it's like it's as if you're gonna swing left. I don't know, maybe. I hated it, but I was willing to talk.
Yeah.
Would you recommend this movie?
Certain people, would
Yes.
have that answer. We
I'll leave it open to some people. Would you recommend this movie to other people?
Hell yeah. I would tell people, like, "Hey, wanna see a big dumb, like, spectacle of a movie that really isn't, it's not really big and dumb, but it kind of has that energy to it, like, golden retriever energy." But I mean, Keanu Reeves has that, but somehow Patrick Swayze has more golden, retriever energy than
Yes,
Keanu Reeves in this movie.
yes. Yes, there's a lot of Mr. Peanut Butter aspects to this movie that make it very enjoyable.
It was a mindfuck going from watching, Bram Stoker's Dracula to watching this, though, on the same day, and it was like Keanu Reeves is, like, really bad gothic English accent, and then this, and I'm like, he does better in his own
No,
voice.
and I'll be doing it in the inverse because 'cause I'm gonna watch Bram Stoker's now, so we'll see if it works any better backwards. And, do you have any final thoughts before we go?
See, you stole my bit with this one.
Yeah, that's so classic. This is too perfect.
I'm sure I stole it from someone else. I don't know. I mean, I think I said everything I wanted to say, except lawyers don't serve.
We have one more month. We won't see him till next summer.
They're traveling on the money, going where the waves are.
That's right. The ex-presidents rip off banks to finance their endless summer.
All right, here we are in the back end at corrections and omissions. And here they are for part 1. Forrest said he wasn't entirely sure if it was exactly 1 year that Movie Night Extravaganza did Clerks after they started, because it was their 100th episode, and you think, like, well, they were a weekly episode and there are 52 weeks in a year, so 100th episode at 1 year, wouldn't that be 2 years? Well, it was, in fact, 1 year. For example, Sorry to Bother You was their episode number 3. That's the one that featured Conan Neutron on his first ever episode. That aired live July 15th, 2021. Episode 100, the episode about Clerks, live July 12th, 2022. So almost exactly a year later from episode 3 to episode 100. So maybe just a smidge over 1 year later, but he was correct in that. The links for both of those episodes will be included in the liner notes, and I definitely suggest that you check them out. I kind of want to start this off with one of my favorite pieces of trivia about this film, which is that it inspired a piece of cult theater called Point Break Live! In which the role of Johnny Utah is played by an audience member chosen by popular acclamation after a brief audition. The new Keanu reads all of his or her lines from cue cards for the duration of the show to, quote, capture the rawness of a Keanu Reeves performance, even from those who generally think themselves incapable of acting, end quote. Oh, it gets even better, girls and boys, because in 2013, Gary Busey attended a performance and received rapturous applause from the audience when he joined the cast on stage, and Lori Petty was known to turn up and participate in several of the performances. How goddamn fantastic. I love this story, and I hope you do as well. Forrest talked about watching all of the movies that he could possibly see on his 2-week trial of Filmstruck when he had it as a kid. And I had never heard of Filmstruck, so I kind of Googled it a little, and it's kind of an interesting story. So here you go. Here's a little bit more about Filmstruck if you also did not know what it was, when it was, what it was, as it is no longer around. Filmstruck was a film streaming service from Turner Classic Movies, or TCM, which catered specifically to cinephiles and focused on classic, foreign, art house, independent, rarer cinema. It launched in November 2016 and succeeded, which means they took over from Hulu, as the exclusive online streaming home of the Criterion Collection, which is something that you'll hear a lot of cinephiles and online movie reviewers talk about. I definitely know if you listen to Movie Night Extravaganza, you will hear Conan Neutron talk about it a lot, as he is a big fan of Criterion and does take part in the Criterion Challenge, which is an online challenge where they give you like a big amount of movies to watch. I think it's one every week, so it's like 52 movies. We'll have to get Conan on to talk more specifically about the challenge. I have been toying with the idea of trying it myself. At the time of their launch, which was in 2016, Filmstruck had 500 movies available to stream, and 200 of those were from the Criterion Collection library. By about 2018, the combined channels on this service had about 1,600 films, and that included about 1,200 films from Criterion. They absorbed Warner Archive Instant that year, which kind of increased their general library. So all of the people who were subscribed to Warner streaming service, which was called Archive Instant at the time, were right into Filmstruck. It's kind of like the Toonami Funimation combination that we saw earlier this year. However, later that year, in October 26th of 2018, Filmstruck announced that they would shut down at the end of November that year, and this was due to Warner Media's restructuring. However, in a response to this, a group of film directors and actors signed a letter appealing directly to Warner Bros. Pictures Group Chairman Toby Emmerich in an attempt to save the service. This letter was signed by Paul Thomas Anderson, Damien Chazelle, Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, Leonardo DiCaprio, James Gray, Alejandro González Inarritu, Barry Jenkins, Rian Johnson, Christopher Nolan, and Barbra Streisand, among others. Previously, Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese had urged Warner Brothers to continue the service, but they're not officially on the letter. 4 days after the letter was released, Warner Media and Criterion announced that the Criterion Channel would launch a standalone service that spring, with a smaller version of the service also being available on Max, because Max is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and Warner Media is still part of Criterion. They're still kind of merged together, although Criterion is just an offshoot of Janus Films. I do have to put a caveat on here, because I'm sure if you're a listener and you're not in the United States and you're not in Canada, you do not have access to the Criterion Channel, as that is something that is specifically for those two regions only. I'm going to describe how awesome it is, so maybe hit fast forward a couple of times, because I don't want you to feel super bad. So if you're not sure what the Criterion Channel is, it's obviously dedicated to movies that are part of the Criterion Collection, and it is a home video distribution company that focuses on restoring and distributing, quote, important classic and contemporary films. It is basically considered a boutique Blu-ray label. A lot of people who are really into physical media are gonna love the Criterion Collection. They even go back as far as, say, 1980s and have laser discs and Betamaxes. But back to what the channel itself as a streaming service offers right now. You get a rotating playlist of temporary licensed films and some television offerings, and those are from a variety of studios and rights holders alongside streaming editions of Criterion Collection releases with special features. And that's really what people come to Criterion for. They want all of those special features. So if you're missing the days of your DVDs containing commentaries and additional information and you want to dive into old films, see if they're on the Criterion Collection and get that copy, because you're going to get a lot of it. That channel also has its own original content, including academic overviews and curated introductions. And it even has Janus-owned titles that have yet to be released on physical media, so you can watch some movies that you can't physically own, which I know is upsetting for some people, but it's still, you want to watch a movie, that might be your only option. Anyway, thought that was a little bit interesting, and if you didn't know that, now you know some more about that. Forrest talks about how NASA was involved in 2001: A Space Odyssey and how different that was for a film to prioritize the accuracy of how things operated in space versus the aesthetics. People were designing ships that were more based on what looks cool and futuristic than what would be actually functionally true about space. And what Forrest said is so incredibly true, it's actually an understatement. According to 4 NASA engineers who based their nuclear propulsion spacecraft design in part on the film's Discovery 1, quote, 2001: A Space Odyssey is perhaps the most thoroughly and accurately researched film in screen history with respect to aerospace engineering. I feel like that last caveat might not necessarily be needed. I do feel like it was incredibly well researched. They had several technicians which were hired, some of whom were recommended by the co-screenwriter Arthur C. Clarke, who himself had a background in aerospace. Advisors for the 2001 Space Odyssey project included Marshall Space Flight Center engineer Frederick Orday III, who worked on the film for 2 years, and I.J. Good, who Kubrick consulted on supercomputers because of Good's authorship of treatises such as Speculations Concerning the First Ultra-Intelligent Machine and Logic of Man and Machine. Dr. Marvin Minsky of MIT was the main artificial intelligence advisor for the film. It accurately presents outer space as not allowing the propagation of sound. This is a sharp contrast to other films in space which often have explosions and sounds passing a spacecraft as being heard. Unless you're listening to the tagline of Alien, in which you do know in space, no one can hear you scream. Its portrayal of weightlessness in spaceships is also more realistic than we had been getting up until that time. It has a really good, realistic depiction of time delay in conversations between space and Earth, like astronauts talking to Earth, because of the distance, which up until the time had been edited out of broadcasts, so people didn't really experience it. I know you're, as a viewer, like, of course I know that happens in movies all the time, but viewers at the time thought it was way more instant than it actually was because they wanted to make it more viewable. Even the way that they handled the suspended animation of the astronauts is more accurate. They had consulting medical authorities be part of that. They even had the writings of Louis Leakey, the anthropologist, as how they determined the depiction of the early humanoids that you see. Every aspect of this is really well thought. That being said, Clarke states that there is one thing that happened on a day when he was not there that is like, oh, if I had been there, I would have caught it. The sequence in which Bowman re-enters Discovery, showing him holding his breath just before ejecting from the pod in the emergency airlock. Holding your breath in this way before exposure to a vacuum would rupture your lungs. That's just not how that works. And Clarke knew that, and he would have said something and stopped it, but you can't be everywhere all at once. Still, all in all, an incredibly accurate movie with regards to what it's like to be in space. Small correction on the B-52 in Dr. Strangelove and how I learned to love the bomb. What Forrest said about this was that the FBI looked into Kubrick for his construction of the interior of that cockpit because it was too accurate, and that he knew how to put it together because he had simply served in the Army and flown in one. That's not true. I think he's conflating Arthur C. Clarke, who did serve in the British Armed Services and was an airman, among many other things. Kubrick did not serve in the Army at any point in his life. However, when Kubrick filmed Dr. Strangelove, he just kind of guessed. Him and his set designer, Ken Adams, said that they figured out how to put together the cockpit because it just made sense. That's it. And I mean, Kubrick is someone who really, really goes into getting things meticulously correct. But even with this, it was just that it made sense. Well, how much sense? They got it so right that they knew exactly where the little black box was located on an incredibly secret government plane. As a result, there are some crazy, unconfirmed rumors about the movie's reception and Kubrick's own paranoia to the reception. The rumors are that Kubrick feared the FBI would investigate him and his production team because it was too accurate, or they were afraid that the movie would be banned for being too accurate. Well, it even goes even further because another unconfirmed but passed along story that I find hilarious and I'm going to give to you guys right now. When Ronald Reagan was elected president, he demanded to see the secret war room underneath the White House. When told, "Sir, that's not a real thing," he quipped back, "I know it is. I saw it in Dr. Strangelove." I am once again here to correct myself about my inability to remember that in 1993, Czechoslovakia peacefully dissolved into two independent countries, the Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia. I do believe Spaceman, written in 2017, came out in 2024, supposed to be kind of like an alternate Earth version where we have this technology, but supposed to be 2024, would be set in the Czech Republic. It does feel like the movie is set in the 80s or the 90s, in which case it would be Czechoslovakia because they were not yet dissolved, but I do know that I need to call this the Czech Republic, and this is me again, making sure that you know I know. We talk about the fantastic 1995 crime thriller Heat. And Forrest says that he thought it was on Netflix. He wasn't sure if it was still on Netflix. He saw it on Netflix. It's owned by Warner Brothers, and so that's going to be on Paramount Plus. You do need to have a Paramount Plus subscription in order to see that streaming. Otherwise, it's going to be $4 from like Apple TV or Amazon or Google Play. I said base jumping when I was telling the story about Gary Busey being enticed to jump at the end of this film with Swayze and calling him crazy. I obviously meant to say skydiving. The whole story was about skydiving. He went skydiving, not base jumping. I said that the Bill Skarsgård film with H. John Benjamin narrating as his voice and him not talking at all, Skarsgård not talking at all, was called Kill. That's not true. It's called Boy Kills World. What I was thinking about, Kill, is a film from about the same year. This is actually 2023, but I think we got it in 2024, which is the same year that Boy Kills World comes out. That's an Indian Hindi language action film directed by Nikhil Nagesh Bhatt, starring Raghav Jual, and it's a It's about a train to New Delhi that becomes a combat battleground as a pair of commandos face off against an army of invading bandits. It's all just on one train, like Snowpiercer. Haven't seen it yet myself, but does look phenomenal. Does have an 89% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and an 84% from just regular viewers like yourself. Boy Kills World, a dystopian action comedy film directed by Moritz Moore in his directorial debut. It's a story about a character named Boy. He is a, quote, mayhem machine, and he's been trying to assassinate the bloodthirsty Hilda von der Koy and avenge his family's murder. This is guided by his sister's mischievous spirit. Boy uncovers one stunning revelation after another as he barrels toward Hilda. That's that little blurb for you. Haven't seen this one either yet. They both seem pretty awesome. Action films that are this aggressive sometimes make me nauseous because the camera moves around a lot, so I need to watch these at home with breaks. So, if you're interested in either of those films, they are out right now. You can watch them. The latter, Boy Kills World, only gets a 58 on Rotten Tomatoes and a 47 from critics, so I probably would just go watch the other one first. We talked a little bit about the name Bodhi in the episode, but we didn't quite get to say what I wanted to say about the meaning of Bodhi, which Tyler does explain to Johnny Utah that the character is named Bodhi, which they've shortened from Bodhisattva. When you say it longer, it's Bodhi instead of Bodhi. Bodhisattva is a term in the Buddhist religion meaning an enlightened being who, out of compassion, forgoes nirvana, forgoes enlightenment in order to help save other people, help guide them towards enlightenment, to nirvana. It's kind of like this stage before being Buddha. What I find interesting about the fact that they call him Bodhi, which is just half of the word, Bodhisattva having sattva at the back end, being literally being, essence, person, or Bodhi at the front, meaning perfect knowledge, awareness, wakefulness. And I found that just a little bit delicious, a little bit interesting, because wake is obviously something that is used in surfing terminology, so it just felt like a little extra fun thing to know. I must have had 40K on my mind when I kept calling War Child Warhammer. And first of all, that's not even Anthony Kiedis' character. Anthony Kiedis plays the character Tone, which makes sense as he is a musician. War Child is played by the New Zealand surfer and actor Vincent Klin. The rest of the group containing Bodhi is Gromit and Roach. Just who could believe that those names don't entirely stick with you? Although I'm sure people who are out there who are like treating this as though they are Sailor Moon characters when you were younger. You know exactly which of your friends were gonna be Tone, in as much as I knew which of us were Sailor Mercury. I said Keanu Reeves was from Hawaii, and I was confused as to why he didn't know how to surf. Well, that's because he is not from Hawaii. Reeves was actually born in Beirut, Lebanon, and is the son of Patricia Taylor, a costume designer and performer, and Samuel Nowlin Reeves Jr. His mother is English, originating from Essex, and his father is from Hawaii and is of native Hawaiian, Chinese, English, and Portuguese descent. His mom was working in Beirut when he met his father. His father abandoned them, sadly, when he was 3 years old, and Reeves didn't grow up in Hawaii, did not grow up with his father at all. After the divorce between those two, his mother moved the family to Sydney, then to New York City. Then she married Paul Aaron, a Broadway and Hollywood director in the 70s, and they moved to Toronto and then shortly got divorced. But Reeves and his sisters grew up primarily in Yorkville, Toronto. So yeah, not a lot of surfing there. I guess Canadian accents have a touch of Southern Cali about them then, right? Because everything about Reeves feels like he grew up in the sun and the shine of the West Coast, not Toronto, but there you go. When did the first Spider-Man movie come out? Which is also the year that Forrest's dad scared Willem Dafoe while he was macking with some chick. I was correct. It was indeed the early aughts. It was 2002. And just one more little tidbit before I go. If you really enjoyed Point Break and you're looking for more stories that are similar, more classic books to read, I mentioned this just in passing, but I really think that you should check out Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. This was pointed out to me by my husband, who is a big fan of Point Break, and what he noted is so incredibly apt. The message here is about one man's spiritual journey toward self-knowledge, and that is really what is happening in Point Break, and really why this is an enduring movie beyond even, say, just the genre of action. It has a somewhat religious intensity. It makes us explore ourselves and continue to do so, because if we don't, then our lives become living deaths. You're just driving in that metal coffin, man. So, check it out. Again, Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, who you might know as having written Siddhartha, which is kind of a similar theory as well. So, 2 good books you can check out, and I hope you do.
You're trying to tell me the FBI is going to pay me to learn to surf?
It's either you or me out there on the board. You get my drift?
Angelo, this is for little rubber people who don't shave yet.
Come on. You're the quarterback, Jock. It's all balance, right? And coordination. How hard can it be?
And that's all for the show this time. Thank you so much for making it to the very end. I'm going to try and keep these quick at the end and just remind you that we are going to be doing Movie Night Extravaganza all month. Fangtober, Fanguary, Sanguary, Blood Tooth Vamp Nober. Oh God, we're doing a month of vampire movies. We're going to be coming to you on Wednesdays, on Tuesdays, on Fridays. It's erratic, it's insane. You have to follow us on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube in order to really know when we're doing it. And if you're following me at Movie Runtime on any of the platforms that I'm on, or Little Deadly Creature on Instagram, you're going to get all these dates, all this information, little tidbits and trivia about each movie as we come upon them. Like, for instance, we're just going to do Nosferatu this coming Wednesday. And did you know that F.W. Murnau's skull was stolen from his grave in 2015? They still haven't found it. Ooh! And for more crazy, weird, creepy facts and some great, astute looking at this silent film, which really you do need to take some time and delve into, and it's not a bad idea to have friends there with you who are very versed in what is going on in silent film, like Matt Weiss, like the guy we're going to have as our guest. So I'm excited. If you can't tell, come join us. And then if you can't do Wednesday, that coming Friday, Renee Roon is going to talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula. You can get your Gary Oldman on. It's going to be great. Join us. We're going to try and figure out what the rules of vampires are and see how consistently they're applied across a bunch of different greats. Thank you so much for making it into the end. I hope you're having a wonderful day, rest of your day, everything. You're awesome. This has been What If I Don't Like It with your host, Katie Baldessaro. See you later, Space Cowboy.